working. Should be working now. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome, everyone who decided to show up. Always a pleasure to have you here at the Raven's Roost, where we do Raven Reads. It has been a bit since we did this. I think it might be the first one of the year, actually, now that I consider it. But yes, we are here. We are back, and it's good to see you guys here. I know we're missing a few faces, but that's okay. That's okay. You know, maybe some people made some New Year's resolutions to do other things on their Monday nights, but that's okay. Welcome, everyone, to Raven Reads. For those of you who are new to this, let me go ahead and explain so that you guys know. I am a writer. I love telling stories. I've been doing it ever since I was in middle school. I love just writing short stories or writing novellas or writing poetry. It's what I love to do. And one thing that I want to do more of is share my work with you guys. I've got a lot of works that I've done, most of which is not published. Some of it I want to publish, and 2 stories I have published. So I'm working to get another book published right now, actually. I'm in the process of getting that book done, but it's very slow going. But what I want to do in these videos is I want to read for you guys. I want to read and share with you guys my stories. 1 second. Fix this. Good. Y'all can still hear me okay, right? Y'all still are able to hear? Let me know if y'all cannot hear me or not. There we go. That seems to fix it. There we go. I was getting some weird audio readings. That was weird. It was acting like the audio was turned off, but it was not. All right. We are good. Okay. So, let me go over the quick ground rules so that you guys know, so that you guys are aware of what we do here. For these streams, I just read. Okay, I just read to you guys. We don't talk games, we don't talk politics, we don't talk policies, we don't talk that stuff. We're just here for the stories and for the reading. And normally I read one of my books to you guys, and we just keep going through that book, but you guys probably want a break from reading Monster Club since it's such a long book. And so what we're going to do today to kind of break the mold a little bit is we're going to read some of my short stories. We're just going to read some short stories that I've written. I've got some set aside for you guys that I think you will like. And then after that, we'll see where we go from there. And then next week, we'll either go back to Monster Club or we'll do a writing stream where I will write some of your writing prompts. So it should be very fun. What's this? Do you have a link to your published stories in your channel profile or something? I can hear you, by the way. I can share a link to my published works later. We can do that later. But for now, let's focus on this. So to start things off, we're going to read one of my short stories. We're going to start with a short story called Seeking Treatment. Now, for those of you who don't know, Seeking Treatment is a part of one of my anthology stories called The Edenite Chronicles. The Edenite Chronicles was a story idea that I came up with some time ago, where imagine if in the Bermuda Triangle, a wormhole opened up to a totally different world, and in this world there are no humans, but there are monsters and races and creatures of myth and fantasy and legend. And now the human world and this fantasy world that has been dubbed Eden are learning to coexist with each other. You have a lot of Edenites, as they're called, coming over to our side to learn about modern humanity and our technology and our industry and our society. And humans are going over there to learn about these different species and peoples and cultures. And so I write different stories called the Edenite Chronicles about humans interacting with these different races and creatures. And I've got one here. This is probably the newest one called Seeking Treatment. So we're going to start with this, and then after that, we'll go into something that's kind of cool I think y'all will like. So without any further ado, we will get into this. Let me take a drink of something real fast. All right. And we shall begin. This is Seeking Treatment, an Edenite story written... Actually, this was written just last year, August 18th. So let's do it. Jonathan looked again at the address on his phone and sighed. There was no question that this was the place he was looking for. A tall and noticeable office building with walls that seemed to be entirely made of windows. If you looked carefully, you could gaze through all of them like a stacked up set of aquariums. Men and women moved about in them or sat at desks or talked to other people, and Jonathan looked at the address as it read, 6th floor, room 11, Dr. Satine Demora, psychiatrist and therapist. He groaned as he read the name and title over and over. He still wasn't entirely sure he wanted to even be here. But he'd had little choice, especially after his little accident. Things were getting out of hand, and now he'd had no choice but to cave and schedule an appointment with a psychiatrist at his doctor's recommendation. He'd set up an appointment and has made his way to the office building where she worked. This wasn't something he was excited for. In fact, he'd met plenty of shrinks before, and he didn't see how she'd be any better. But, obediently, he made his way in. The lobby at the bottom was huge and spacious, with a circular cubicle desk in the center with 3 different receptionists talking away on phones or speaking to guests and patients. He walked right by them into the elevator. He already knew the floor and room number, so no point in stopping to ask. One short ride to the 6th floor later, and another walk to a dreary hallway with only a handful of pictures, paintings, and a few potted plants to mark it as unique. And after checking each door, he found himself outside of door 11, the door of Dr. Demora's office. He knocked. "Come in, it's unlocked," a soft voice spoke. Jonathan pushed open the door and saw a large room waiting for him. There was a desk by the huge window stretched across the far wall to view the city beyond. There was a shelf full of books, binders, and papers that stood near the desk just behind the large office chair. On the other side of the room, away from the desk, was an enormous plush couch that Jonathan could easily lay on and roll over twice before falling off. But none of these things were what really caught his attention. Sitting in her office chair was Dr. Satine, and she was not what Jonathan expected at all. She was shorter than him, but she was undeniably attractive. Dark black hair was tied back in a professional bun on her head. She wore glasses on her face and professional business attire, a blazer, blouse, and office skirt, as well as high heels. But it was there that her normal human features ended. She had deep red skin, for one thing, as well as a long tail swishing underneath her with a spade at the end. Sprouting from her back, but folded behind her, were 2 huge red bat-like leathery wings that seemed ready to spread wide and lift her into the air. 2 large black horns were easily spotted growing from her forehead as they swooped back and curled, but perhaps most striking of all were her eyes. The sclera, which would normally be white, was black as pitch, and the pupils were a fiery red crimson, which actually seemed to burn as though the pupils themselves were on fire. As he stared, the woman's smile through pouty lips revealed sharp canine fangs. This woman was an Edenite. 10 years ago, humans had discovered a portal to another world called Eden, where humans were non-existent and only non-human races dwell, like elves, dwarves, centaurs, and goblins. The human world, which the Edenites called Terra, prepared for war with their new neighbors, but in the end peace was found, as well as mutual cooperation and exchange. Now, Terrans and Edenites can travel between worlds and interact, learn and grow together, and Jonathan had even met a few Edenites, but not many. He had no idea that his new psychiatrist was one herself, and she looked positively sexy, but also terrifying. Fight or flight instincts kicked in, and Jonathan felt an urge to run, to get out of the building. He didn't, though, his eyes still glued to the woman in front of him. She looked close to his age, if maybe a few years younger or older. It was hard to place, and with Edenites it wasn't always easy. He started to say something, but his voice caught in his throat. Noticing his dumbfounded staring, Dr. Satine giggled playfully. "Welcome, Mr. Anderson. I'm Dr. Satine Demora, and judging from your expression, I take it this is your first time meeting a succubus." What? Succubus? Jonathan found himself breathing in disbelief, his whole body shivering slightly. Dr. Satine giggled knowingly and shook her head.
"All right, before you ask, no, I'm not a demon or an unholy monster here to steal your soul. Believe me, I've had to convince no small number of your paranoid priests and exorcists of that since coming to Terra. Why don't you come on in? Make yourself comfortable."
Jonathan gulped but walked in obediently. Dr. Satine Demora held out her hand to shake, and Jonathan took it, surprised how cool and soft her hand was in contrast to the warm skin tone she had.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, likewise. I'm sorry, but... Jonathan started to stammer, but Dr. Demora laughed and cut him off.
"Still a bit much, right?" She laughed. "All right, well, take a seat on the couch over there while I fill you in."
Jonathan nodded dumbly and walked to the sofa, sitting down politely and carefully on the plush cushion, finding that he almost sank into the upholstery. Satine rolled her chair over to join him, never losing her polite smile.
"So, let's put your mind at ease, shall we? I'll elaborate a little. I'm a succubus, a race native to Eden. I understand that my kind bears a striking resemblance to demons of Terran folklore, and for that reason, a reputation precedes me everywhere I go. But I can promise you that I am not a monster, nor am I a demon come to consume your soul. My doctorate and credentials are all authentic, earned, and up to date, so you have nothing to fear from me."
Jonathan listened to her speak, her smile enticing and her eyes soft but still burning. "I believe you, but it's just so... I'm sorry, it's just not what I expected.
I imagine not, but your doctor, one Dr. McKay, correct?
She waited for Jonathan to nod before continuing.
Yes, Dr. McKay recommended you to me, so perhaps it'd be good for us both to give each other a shot. Agreed?
Jonathan found himself nodding again, but then stupidly raising his hand like a shy student in class wanting to ask a question, but not wanting to appear stupid. The gesture brought a bubbling chuckle from Dr. Demora.
Yes?
Sorry, I don't mean to sound rude or anything, but may I ask you something about...
You want to know more about succubi, I take it?
She asked with a raised eyebrow. Actually, that wasn't what Jonathan was curious about. Certainly he was interested in knowing more about succubi, but that wasn't what he wanted to ask. Still, he felt shameful for wanting to ask his original question, so he just lowered his head and nodded.
I don't mind talking about my race, but this session is supposed to be about you, Mr. Anderson, and I'd hate to waste our time on just me, so how about we make a deal? I will answer one of your questions for each one of mine. Deal?
Jonathan gave an agreeable nod, a little disappointed he couldn't ask what he wanted, so he merely accepted the agreed-upon deal.
Wonderful. So, I'd like to start, if we could. I want you to tell me what brought you here. Why did Dr. McKay want you to visit me?
Jonathan frowned and then looked down and away, staring at the trash can near the bookshelf in her office gloomily. He says I'm suffering from PTSD and depression.
Can you elaborate on that?
I don't know, Jonathan answered honestly. Dr. Moore's face finally faded to a sympathetic frown.
Mr. Anderson, would you mind if I called you Jonathan?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, Jonathan. Let's be honest with each other. You don't want to be here. Your doctor told you to come here because he thinks you need it, but you disagree. Tell me why.
The request struck like an arrow to the heart. She read him like a book, and she barely knew him yet. Jonathan tried not to let his surprise show, but he shrugged. Look, it's just like some emotional stuff, nothing to get bent out of shape over.
What do you mean?
You know what, isn't it my turn to ask a question? Jonathan snapped. Dr. Demora paused, but then gave an accepting smile.
All right, fair enough. What do you want to know?
Jonathan was a little surprised at her willingness to concede, but took advantage. Time for him to dig a little, he thought. All right, in Terra, succubi are considered sex demons. Is that true at Eden? He asked. Ordinarily, he would have been more hesitant to go for the throat like that, but he was shaken by her ease of analyzing him, and now he wanted to shake her up a little. However, if she was shaken by the question, she masterfully disguised it. She stretched her wings slightly, and her tail swished, but otherwise she didn't look perturbed or angry.
Not quite, but the reputation isn't without merit, she answered. Here's the truth. Succubi and incubi are our male counterparts. We feed on powerful emotions and sensations. Pain, joy, sadness, anger, fear, things like that. Sexual euphoria, which is the pleasure felt from sexual arousal or interaction, is particularly powerful and flavorful as an emotion, and there are plenty of my kind who become quite addicted to it. It's not the sexual intercourse itself that they enjoy, but the emotions from it that they grow attached to. So they whore themselves, allowing themselves to be used as common sluts. There was an edge of venom in her voice as she bit down on the last part of her explanation. Something about that seemed to annoy and aggravate her, and Jonathan realized he had indeed touched a nerve, if not intentionally. I take it you don't agree with that? But suddenly the smile was back on her face and she wagged her finger. My turn.
Jonathan winced but nodded.
But since you did ask, I'll answer no. I do not agree with that form of devious behavior.
She leaned back and adjusted herself, crossing one leg over the other.
But since I answered 2 of your questions, you answered 2 of mine.
Fine, that's fair.
Good. You said earlier that this was all emotional stuff and it was no big deal. Could you explain what you mean and why it's no big deal?
Jonathan's brow furrowed. No one cares.
I don't understand.
I'm just sad a lot. It's really nothing to get bent out of shape over. I mean, we all get sad sometimes, right? And no one wants to hear a grown man bellyache because he's not happy about stuff. Jonathan grumbled. Why do you assume that? Because that's how it is.
Jonathan,
Dr. Demora pressed, giving him a knowing look like a mother waiting for her child to stop lying and tell the truth that he was the one who stole from the cookie jar. Realizing that fighting wasn't going to go well, he groaned and relented. Look, growing up, if I ever cried or got angry or upset, my dad would tell me to suck it up. He'd say I'm not a baby anymore, and crying or getting upset won't make anyone like me. A real man has to manage his emotions.
And how do you manage them?
I just don't show them. I just deal with them.
Is that what a man is supposed to do?
What else can he do? Jonathan snarled. No one cares when a man cries. No one runs to help him when he has a bad day. We have to be strong. We have to be independent. We can't show weakness. I can't show weakness.
Why?
Because I have to, Jonathan spat, his teeth gritting and his knuckles whitening as he clenched his fists.
Do you want to cry?
She asked. Jonathan didn't answer, but just hung his head. As if sensing he needed to stop, Dr. Damora let out a long sigh.
I apologize. I asked you too many questions without offering you a chance. Would you like to ask me something?
Jonathan looked down at his feet and didn't bother staring at her. So, you don't like the reputation of succubi as sex demons?
No, I do not, she answered firmly. It's a shameful thing that my kind would so willingly whore themselves just for a bit of euphoria. It's left us with a very unbecoming reputation that I wish doesn't exist.
Does it get hard for you? Jonathan asked, calming himself some.
Oh, quite often, yes, Dr. Damora answered. In Eden, it's not always so difficult. Most Edenites know how succubi function and how we feed, so they can usually distinguish the ones who live like prostitutes and the ones who don't. But in Terra, I've yet to meet anyone who didn't automatically assume I was either an easy-access sexual deviant or a demon in need of extermination. My word, just keeping and helping clients has been its own cross to bear.
Then why be a psychiatrist in Terra, then? Jonathan asked.
Tell you what, Jonathan. I'll answer that one, but first, I want you to do me a favor, Dr. Damora offered. If you do me this one favor, I'll allow you to ask me anything else you want for the rest of our time.
Jonathan actually perked up at this. You mean it?
I do.
She reached behind her towards her desk and picked up a manila folder. From within, she pulled out a few packets of papers and then set the folders and papers in her lap before looking at Jonathan with an expectancy that made him a little nervous. Okay, what is it?
Dr. McKay took the liberty of sending me your hospital report from 6 years ago.
Jonathan's body went rigid and his hair stood on end with a fury.
I want you to tell me what happened.
Isn't that doctor-patient confidentiality?
Under the HIPAA privacy rule, a doctor can share information with other doctors that they feel is crucial to the treatment of a patient without their consent. Jonathan, I want you to tell me about this hospital visit. Why were you there? What happened to you?
I don't want to talk about it, Jonathan snarled.
According to Dr. McKay, your symptoms of depression and PTSD all started sometime after this incident. I feel it can help me get to the root of what's going on.
It was a stupid mistake.
Tell me about it,
she encouraged. Jonathan snorted. But then he looked at Dr. Damora. She didn't budge. He glared at her, and she gave a calm expression. She had no fear in her eyes. No trepidation. Fine. Jonathan looked away angrily, and frustration was wringing his hands, the memory of that night coming back to him slowly and without welcome. Satine watched him and leaned back, folding her wings and adjusting her glasses.
When you're ready.
I was dating this girl named Samantha. We'd been together for about 4 months, and I really, really liked her. I thought she was the girl for me, and one night we were both out jogging.
Jogging?
We were both kind of workout nuts, and it was summertime, so it was only comfortable to run in the evening. She had a fanny pack, though, so she could carry our phones, and while we ran, We were planning to do just a short 5K and then go back home.
A 5K run is short, Satine snickered.
You asked me to tell you the story, Jonathan snarled.
Satine waved her hand. I'm sorry, you're right. Continue.
Well, we were both pretty worn out, so we stopped at a gas station to grab water. But as we were drinking and talking about our plans for the next few days, this guy just walks up to us. He was wearing a hoodie, so I couldn't see his face too good, but he pulls a knife on us and demands our money. Jonathan clenched his fists furiously. He just waved it in my face and hers. Samantha wanted to scream, but he said if she did, he'd cut her throat. He said to hand over her fanny pack or he'd...
Take your time, Satine whispered.
Jonathan closed his eyes and inhaled slowly and angrily. I didn't mind giving him my wallet. There wasn't much in it anyway, and I was scared. But then he turned on Samantha, and I don't know, I lost it, and I attacked him. Jonathan paused, waiting for Samantha to speak, waiting on anything to happen, waiting on a reprimand, a verbal lashing, anything that Satine might say, but instead she just watched him, studying his every expression. So he continued. I took some karate as a kid, but it really didn't make any difference. We were just pounding each other. At one point, he managed to get his knife out and stab me with it. He stabbed me 4 times, twice in the arm, once in the stomach, and another time in the shoulder. Jonathan used his finger to show the scar locations on his body. Samantha screamed bloody murder, and all I could do was just thrash and hit him with all I had. I don't know what happened next. It was all a blur. I was furious. I was scared. I wanted to protect Samantha and make her stop screaming. Jonathan froze. The memory so vivid it was like he was there. His hand was rubbing the scar on his shoulder, the one that had been hurting him the most while he punched and punched and punched. I remember I was on the ground bleeding, and so was the other guy. He was out cold.
You beat him unconscious? Satine asked.
According to the police, I'd broken his nose, jaw, and gave him a concussion.
How did that make you feel, Jonathan?
How am I supposed to feel?
There's no right way to feel about something like that. I just want to know what you did feel at the time.
I felt scared, Jonathan grumbled. I was scared that I was going to die. I was scared that Samantha was hurt. I was scared that I'd killed the guy.
You were scared you'd killed him? You were worried about him?
Not really. I just didn't want to be a murderer. But at some point, an ambulance and a bunch of police showed up. Apparently, someone called the police. I was taken to the hospital. They took me into surgery and all kinds of other stuff. I don't know all the specifics. All they told me was I was really lucky.
And what happened to Samantha? You didn't mention where she was.
Jonathan's nose wrinkled and he hissed. She'd run away at some point while we were fighting. She'd gone to get help, but she came to see me in the hospital. You know what she told me? Jonathan didn't wait for Satine to respond. She said she wanted to break up. She said I was terrifying that night. She said what I did was horrifying. I just lost myself. And apparently she'd been begging me to stop hitting him, to stop fighting. She was just scared. But I don't remember her saying any of that. I don't remember her doing anything. But she just said she was scared of me now, and I didn't want... She said she didn't want to be with me anymore because she was scared of me, even though I was the one who fought for her.
I imagine that hurt, Satine breathed.
I was mortified. Jonathan snapped, biting down on the word. I'd risked my life for her. I fought to keep her safe. I nearly died so she wouldn't be hurt, and I was the one that was frightening to her. I was the one who scared her. Jonathan slammed his fist down on his knee furiously and roared, I'm not some goddamn monster! Satine didn't answer or respond. She just watched him. And I wanted to say that to her. Jonathan finally whimpered, tears starting to build their way up to his eyes. Some days, actually a lot of days, I probably imagine myself saying that to her. Imagine myself going back in time and telling her that I'm not a monster, that she should have been thanking me. Even if I was a bit scary, I was trying to keep her safe. Jonathan found hot tears rolling down his cheeks. His lids started to hurt, and he fought the pain, clenching his eyes shut forcefully and with a will.
You're allowed to cry if you want to, Jonathan.
It's stupid, though. It's history.
You were severely hurt, Jonathan. Wounds like that don't heal quickly, and if left untreated, they fester into exactly what you're dealing with now. Depression, PTSD, insomnia, Satine replied.
They're just knife scars.
That's not the only injury, Jonathan. You risked your life and nearly lost it for the sake of someone you loved, and that person did not appreciate your sacrifice. And they punished you for it. You had done something you assumed to be altruistic and righteous, and instead were betrayed.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head, Doc. So that's what happened. Now you know.
Thank you for telling me all that, Jonathan. Satine smiled warmly. Now, I promise that you could ask me anything you wanted with the rest of our time, but first, let me give you your treatment.
Satine stood up from her chair and walked to Jonathan. Jonathan started to recoil, but Satine shook her head.
It's all right. This won't hurt. I need you to relax and trust me. Focus on those hurt feelings and those sensations of betrayal.
Jonathan didn't need to be instructed to do that. He was already very caught up in them. Satine then leaned forward and placed her hand on his shoulder and then touched her forehead to his. At first, nothing happened, when suddenly Jonathan felt himself growing weightless. It was as if all the anger and fury and sadness was just ebbing away, slipping off of his body in a way. It felt pleasant. And not happy necessarily, but just tranquil, sanguine. He was peaceful. His body relaxed, his shoulders sagged some, and at last Satine pulled her face away and leaned back, her eyes closed, her nostrils flaring as if inhaling a very deep breath.
That's it. It's a good thing you're my last patient, because that was very filling.
What did you do? Jonathan asked. He wanted to be more shocked and angry and surprised, but it was like he simply couldn't bring up the feelings.
I consumed your emotions, your pain, your sadness, your anger. You should feel relaxed for the next few hours, she explained.
Wait, so I'm cured? Jonathan asked. Satine shook her head with an apologetic smirk.
I wish it were that simple, dear. No, what I offer through that treatment is only temporary. In time, your emotions will bubble back to the surface like a fountain. But I can offer temporary relief for you during our sessions. My job isn't to cure you of your emotions and pain with my powers. My job is to help you work through your struggles and pain in a healthy manner.
She gave a long and exasperated sigh.
But some of my patients don't quite grasp that, and they don't bother trying to fix themselves or take any suggestions or advice. Instead, they just want to come back session after session for more of my special treatment. Hey, it's their money to burn, so I sure won't stop them, but it's not healthy either. Becoming addicted to a succubus's abilities is not at all a wise decision.
She then frowned gently and looked Jonathan in the eyes, her deep reddish-yellow eyes finding his very soul.
Jonathan, I want to help you as best as I can. You don't deserve to live with the pain you currently do, and if you're willing to trust me, I'd like to schedule you to come see me a few more times so we can work through some of this together. Is that all right?
Jonathan found himself slowly nodding. Maybe it was the peace he was feeling right now, but he wanted to do this. He wanted to come back. Yeah, I think I can do that. Jonathan gave a sheepish grin. But, Miss Demora, didn't you say I could ask you a question?
I did.
She then checked her watch.
But we only have time for a few, so make them count.
Jonathan knew what he wanted to ask her. When he first met her, he wanted to ask this, but he couldn't out of shame. Now, though, he felt no shame, no fear, no inhibition. She'd sucked it all out of him. He could ask it now, and so he would. Will you go out with me? He asked. Whatever she'd been expecting him to ask, it was not this. Satine looked stunned by the question, her eyes widening and her lips parted into a partial look of awe.
I'm sorry, what?
I just think you're really kind and really pretty, Jonathan confessed. Why didn't he feel more embarrassed? Was it the result of her feeding on his emotions? I'd like to take you on a date.
Satine's face slowly melted into a frown. Jonathan, I'm flattered, but I'm afraid I can't do that. For one thing, you're my patient, and that's a violation of our professional relationship. And second, I'm sorry, but I swore off relationship with Terrans years ago.
Why's that? Jonathan asked again, no restraint showing in his lack of tact. Satine bristled a bit and bit her lip. That's no business of, you did say I could ask anything, Jonathan retorted. Satine blinked and her wings extended in surprise and almost defensive fury. If Jonathan were in his right mind, he'd be blushing with shame and embarrassment, but instead he just waited for her answer. Satine huffed and folded her wings.
Well, yes, I suppose I did say that, she hissed. Very well. If you must know, I shall explain, but after this I will answer no more questions.
Satine lifted her leg and crossed it over the other. She rested her arms against each other and crossed them beneath her breast in a restive posture.
So, let's see. I came to Terra about 7 years ago to get an education. I got my doctorate in psychology and psychotherapy in the States, believe it or not. While I was in university, I met a young human man named Devin. Sweet guy, really. We collaborated a lot, shared work, took 3 classes together, but I wasn't fooled. I knew he had feelings for me, but I had them too for him, if I'm being honest. I thought he was charming and handsome too, so I didn't mind letting him get close and trying to sweet-talk me. I liked the attention. One day, he finally asked me if I wanted to go out, and I said yes. We went for drinks that evening, and we even went to see a movie, but when the date ended, he invited me to his place. I declined, of course. I wasn't ready to go that far with him, and I made that clear, and he was stunned. I'll never forget the look on his face when I'd refused. Do you know what he said to me? He looked me dead in the eye and said, "But aren't all succubi kind of slutty?"
Satine burst out laughing without mirth or joy.
Oh, I was quite livid. I can't entirely blame him for believing that, of course. The reputation of succubi hadn't been challenged in Terra yet, and he, of course, thought what he wanted to think about me.
What did you do? Jonathan asked.
Well, I broke up with him, of course, she remarked, although perhaps I did it in a far more aggressive and angry manner than I make it sound now. I recall a few obscenities being thrown at him before I flew off.
Satine gave a low groan and brushed strands of black hair behind her pointed ears.
But that's all in the past, I suppose. The point is that I find it very difficult to trust Terran men not to just see me as an object of sex, and so I have sworn off of it.
I don't see you that way, Jonathan replied. Satine shot him a look and gave a mischievous smile.
Oh, is that right? She giggled. Then tell me this, Jonathan. If I were to agree to date with you, can you promise that you won't try to proposition me? You won't get all hot and bothered at the sight of me? You'll see me as just a normal woman and not a slutty succubus? Jonathan paused and thought about it a moment. While he didn't have any inhibitions or shame now thanks to that strange feeding she'd done, he couldn't bring himself to lie either.
Honestly, I don't know.
Don't you?
I mean, I'd like to think that I wouldn't do anything inappropriate or treat you poorly. I was raised better than that, but at the same time, I don't know how you'd appear to look or when not professional like this, so I guess it's possible that your natural allure would mess with me. All I can promise is that I wouldn't intentionally try to hurt you.
And if we were mugged, what would you do?
I'd protect you.
Didn't it scare away your last girlfriend?
Jonathan would likely have taken exception to that, but with the effects of his treatment still in play, he found himself unbothered. Yeah, I guess I would, he confessed. But I don't know, you listening to my whole story and you seem to understand me. Plus, you just told me how you were betrayed too, so we both get it. I would hope you wouldn't betray me the same way I wouldn't betray you, and if I were to betray your trust, you of course would have every right to leave me behind, because then I really would be a monster.
Satine stared for a long moment, her eyes unreadable and her lips closed. Then, very gradually, her lips spread into a smile. Well, my goodness, just listen to you. I don't think you could get my heart fluttering a little like that in my life. All right, Jonathan. Maybe I'll give you a chance, but that does mean we'll have to refer you to a new psychiatrist. I don't want to violate our doctor and patient relationship because of our new relationship.
Sure, but does that mean...
Yes, I'll give you a chance. Let's see if we can't help treat each other.
And that was Seeking Treatment, an Edenite story. All right. Next up, I have a very interesting treat for you guys. So, I'm going to be reading a couple of short stories for you guys written for Jay. So for those who don't know, Jay is one of my closest friends. He's an awesome guy. He is a professional comic artist, and he is the one who has drawn all the For Honor images that I use for my For Honor analysis series. And he is in the process of writing a sci-fi series of stories, which is really cool. And he has asked me a couple times to write stories that take place in his science fiction world. It's a very cool world. It's a very cool idea, and I wish you were here to hear me read these, but he's quite busy right now. So I'm going to read a few of the stories that I have written for his world. I'm going to read Zara, Souls and Starships, and Ambition for Heaven. So I think you will like these. So let's get to it. We'll start with Zara, written on August 14th, 2024. The large metallic doors hissed open, and I tried to keep my eyes focused on everything around me. I didn't want to look at the four men standing around me. They wore dirty fatigues and gas masks to hide their features more than anything. I wore a hooded poncho over my own head to be more discreet, but I was clearly not one of them. Not yet, anyway. The air around us was freezing cold as flurries of snow whirled and swirled around us, blanketing us, and the ground around us in gray, white sheets of ice and slush. The sky was a puffy sea of dreary clouds that made me feel somewhat pressured. I'd only been on Oracal 2 for a week now, but I'd already grown sick of the icy world. But I didn't really get a say in all this. I'd been given a job, and now I had to do it. Eyes forward, new meat, the man in front of me snapped. As the doors finally opened, I turned my attention to the man standing on the other side of them. He was in his 40s, easily, with a bald head and a mechanical knot on his head. I cringed at the sight of it. The more I looked at him, I saw more nodes and holes in his hands, his shoulders, his head, and even the backs of his neck. I knew what he was. He was a technolocutor, a man who was designed to be plugged into terminals. People like him had been more common with an average USB cable than a human, and they had fewer morals. "This him?" the technolocutor asked. "Yeah, boss," the man in front of me grunted, stepping aside so the mechanized man could look me over with his pale eyes. "You must be Stephen McHale. A pleasure to meet you." "And you are?" I asked. "Call me Doctor," he answered with a smile and a twisted sneer across his yellow teeth. "Everyone does." "Sure thing," I answered. "So, what is this place?" The doctor gave me a look of amusement before turning to his armed guards who still stood around me. Let's show him, he answered. He turned and walked inside. I followed obediently and quickly began making note of everything I saw here. The truth was, I already had an idea where I was, and if I was right, I had to be sure I remembered every detail of this place. We walked through agonizingly dark corridors with ice sheets wrapped around the concrete and metallic walls. Weak and blinking lights lit the way as I shuffled my feet behind the doctor and his lackeys. A few of the gunmen held las pistols, and one I thought was holding an ion blaster. I wasn't armed in the slightest. I wasn't allowed to be, not if I wanted to win the trust of the men here. As we went further through the corridors, I noted an odd smell in the air. "What's that smell?" I finally asked. "Shut it," one of the gunmen snarled. "It's the smell of rotting flesh," the doctor replied. "Our specimens here don't always survive the freeze we put them in, and thus they become rotting carcasses." Specimens? Freeze? I don't know what I was expecting from this place, but frankly, that was not it. I held my tongue, though. If I acted like I was uncertain or doubting them now, then my credibility would be forfeit, along with my life. I simply nodded and kept on walking along with them, waiting to get more clues about where we were. "So, my boys tell me that you're sympathetic to our cause?" the doctor asked. "Yeah, more or less, though I'm not sure about y'all yet," I answered, playing the role I needed to. "I ran a check on your background, Mr. McHale," the doctor replied, tapping one of his head nodes. I shivered at the understanding of what that meant. Technolocutors plugged their nodes into wires that attached to supercomputers designed to link up with their brains. They could then use their bodies to work with the machines to gather knowledge, control mainframes, and endless other possibilities. He'd probably have no trouble researching my background, but I was ready for that. "And," I asked hopefully, "everything looked good, Mr. McHale. A former analyst for the GCU's outer banking interest. Attacked by pirates and lost your supplies as well as your job without compensation. Your wife leaves you. You have no family still alive. Is this all accurate?" "You're right on the money," I growled. It was all lies, of course. A cover set for me by the GCU for this very undercover operation. I breathed a gentle sigh of relief that the boys back on Earth had done a good job making me a cover for this. After all, when you're a shadow, you can't afford the slightest mistake. I am a shadow, a secret agent of the Galactic Central Union. It was my job to protect the government and all of her citizens from the threat of insurrectionists like this one. I hadn't been a shadow for longer than a few years, but I'd taken this job as soon as it was offered. Apparently, there had been old insurrectionist activities taking place on Oracal, too, for the last few years, and the GCU brass was beginning to wonder if this was perhaps their center of operations in the western fringes of the galaxy. Since I wasn't well known in the GCU yet, that meant I had a low profile and I could afford to move a bit more freely. I was to go undercover as a disgruntled GCU employee, seek out the insurrectionists underground, and try to find out what was going on in this ice world. It had taken months. But now here I was, finally ready to see what they were hiding. As we went further into the base, I was already thinking of how I'd get this doctor to spill more information to me.
"Who are you?"
"What?" I asked. The doctor paused and glanced at me. "Yes." "You said something?" I said, shocked. "I said nothing," he answered, his eyebrow raised. "Are you nervous by any chance?" "Well, yeah, I am. I'm walking through an underground ice fortress with no idea what's happening next." The doctor sneered again. "Excellent. If you weren't at all nervous about being here, then I'd have to wonder if you were even human." He turned and kept walking. I sighed. I'd saved myself that time, but what was that voice, though? I'd heard it, but it sounded so strange, like it had come from deep within my mind. I tried to forget it, but the more I tried to push the thought aside, the more sure I felt that I'd heard something. But at long last we stopped at a crossroads in the corridor. I looked around for distinguishing features. However, all I saw was the same white ice-like walls and snow-patterned floors. The doctor turned towards the left, and I followed. This path took us into a large laboratory of sorts. The sight was incredible. There were wires running up every wall, computer screens flashing and giving messages constantly. There were beakers of fluids and huge electrodes that pulsed with electric power. I heard gurgling and growling from the multiple machines, batteries, and engines running through the room. I stared at it all and couldn't stop my mouth from opening in disbelief.
"You are new."
Gah! I clutched my head. There it was, that voice again. I tried to play it off and shake my head, but the doctor was now looking at me curiously. "Are you quite all right?" he asked. "Yeah, just headaches." "Are you perhaps hearing voices?" he asked. My eyes widened, and this was all the confirmation he needed. "You are, aren't you?
Well, it seems you're exactly what I'm looking for, Mr. McHale.
What you're looking for? The doctor walked away and towards a big chair near the largest computer screen. He sat down in it, and almost instantly tendrils of cords and wires rose up as if like snakes and snared his nose. The doctor jolted only a moment before he opened his eyes and smiled widely. His gunmen all looked away in disgust like I did. Technolocutors were not liked by anyone, not even their own allies. You see, Mr. McHale, I was going to have you killed. I felt my blood run cold. Killed? Come now, I'm no fool. I could tell you were a plant from those bastards at the GCU, he sneered. Did you think you could deceive us so easily? But my background, clean as a whistle. Too clean. The Union's biggest problem was always being too perfect. So when I couldn't find a single fault in your background, I knew it wasn't right. That was their problem with us, too. His sneer turned to a disgusted frown. Those of us with blemishes, with baggage, the ones they'd rather not look at, erase us and pretend we don't exist. They couldn't understand, wouldn't appreciate the gifts I was offering them, their loss and the gain of the insurrection. But that's how life works, right? But his sneer was back, and with your help, we're going to strike a blow the GCU will never recover from. The hell are you wanting me to do? Like I'll ever help you destroy the GCU, I challenged, dispensing with the cover now that it was blown. Initially, I thought you were just a mole. I let you in, kill you, and be done with the whole affair. But then you started hearing her. Her? I asked. Do you know what we're doing here, Mr. McHale? What this place is? I shrugged. Your base of operations? No, you fool! Do you even have any comprehension of this planet? What Oracle 2 is? The doctor shouted with raving laughter. You ignorant fool! Do the GCU educators teach you nothing? This place, this miserable ice ball, was once populated by a race of aliens. Perhaps you're familiar with the name, the Zerathons? I felt my whole body shiver, and it had nothing to do with the cold. That word was as taboo as a vow of death. The very name Zerathon was enough to send children squeaking in fright and the elderly into panic attacks. The Zerathons were an ancient alien race that people talked about only in stories and tales now. But before the GCU ruled the galaxy, they were considered one of the most powerful and dangerous alien races to exist. No one had seen them in thousands of years, but it was believed that they had incredible psychic powers and perhaps even some kind of technomancy. What was known is that they were extinct, and yet no one dared set foot on their former worlds for fear of arousing any that may lay dormant. This is a Zerathon world? Oh, yes, the doctor laughed. And not only that, I have one alive. He flexed his neck muscles, and I saw the computers begin to whirl and buzz coming alive. I saw something move and watched in horror as a great tube nearby suddenly began to hiss. The doors rolled away to reveal a giant vat. It was a stasis tube filled with a bright green liquid. Floating in the fluid, with life support wires and breathing apparatuses glued to it, was a female figure, but clearly not human. She had grayish-white skin. Her large eyes were closed as if she were sleeping. Long, silvery hair whisked about in the water, floating about her. Her lower body was made up of not just the gray flesh, but what looked like a fluid metal and machinery. I stepped back in horror. Was she alive? Was she really a Zerathon? I found her in the recesses of this old fortress. In fact, these passageways and corridors are not originally built by us, but left behind. We are in a form of temple originally built by the Zerathons. I found numerous specimens of these creatures, and I attempted to revive them all, but most died in the thawing attempt. Only this one remains, and she is unresponsive to anything I try. I have probed her physical body and her mind with every ounce of my power, but nothing will cause a sensation. But the moment you started hearing voices, I knew. I could tell. She's talking to you. I don't know why she has decided to communicate with you, Mr. McHale, but I can't possibly ignore this possibility. I want you to convince her to wake up. I heard everything he said, but I could scarcely believe it as he said it. This man, this monster, was out of his mind. You can't be serious. You want me to do what? You want me to communicate with a living Zerathon? It can't be done. It's madness. This thing shouldn't even be alive.
I think you will.
Suddenly, the gunmen turned their blasters on me, and I became painfully aware that this decision was not mine to make.
I can't kill you if the Zerathon has taken an interest in you. But I will hurt you. Terribly. Perhaps your pain will bring out a response from her as well. How much do you think it will take?
Okay! I groaned, recognizing my impossible situation, then turned my attention to the horrifying creature floating in the tank. I approached slowly and sighed, not sure how to start, but knowing if I didn't do something, then I was going to wish I was dead. I placed my hand hesitantly on the glass tank and closed my eyes. I didn't expect anything to happen. But then,
help me.
Ugh! I winced at the violating voice in my head. It was female, but not quite human, somehow otherworldly.
She speaks to you again. Tell me what she says. Lie to him.
Why? I asked.
Because that's what I demand, the doctor bellowed. I said, tell me. Release me.
I can't, I whimpered.
Are you not going to tell me?
I turned to look at him. She's not saying anything, I answered. I hear like faint buzzing. It's like a static, sort of like a transmission. The doctor glared at me angrily, but then turned back to his terminal.
I will pump some chemicals into the vat to stimulate her. Perhaps that will help her be more agreeable.
No, I shouted fast.
What? What is it?
All eyes were on me. I shivered with fear. This creature was speaking, but her voice was not angry. It was pleading.
Instruct him to lower the sedative agents.
Sedatives, I whispered. Doctor, do you use sedative agents on her?
Yes. I pump a steady supply of sedatives into the vat to ensure she doesn't wake up.
The doctor answered. So that explained it. The Zerathon couldn't do anything more than whisper in my mind because her body wasn't fully conscious. If the sedatives were lowered, she could free herself. But was that a good idea? I was again faced with an impossible situation. If I helped the doctor interview and study this creature, there was no doubt he'd kill me in the end. But he'd no doubt gain access to the powers and knowledge of an ancient and dangerous race. But if I helped the Zerathon, what kind of threat would that pose to the GCU? What do I do? What could I do?
I mean you no harm, Earthchild.
The voice was soft but urgent, pleading, but also gentle.
I ask you to trust me.
Maybe lower the sedatives a level a bit? I asked. Just a little. Enough to help me hear her words clearly.
That is risky, but if necessary, very well. Only for a moment.
He went about his work and watched, waiting, expecting.
Step away from my prison, Earthchild.
I stepped back fast, intending to get away. The doctor noticed. He blinked, and then realized what I'd done. He started to adjust, but it was too late. Her eyes burst open. They were abnormally large and round, with large black pupils and gray sclera. Her long arms reached out towards the glass dome in front of her and began to crack and shatter.
Up the sedative! Increase the...
The doctor was frantically trying to put her back to sleep, but it was too late. The glass container shattered outwards and fluid poured everywhere as the Xanathon dropped to the ground on hands and knees. She rose swiftly and looked around her. Her teeth were bared into a snarl. She let out an inhuman shriek. The air pulsated with power, and I felt myself thrown back as the machinery around me screamed, flashed, and blinked before several terminals began exploding. The Zerathon was a technomancer, or at the very least incredibly powerfully psychic. Her mind is ripping apart this whole facility. The gunmen were training their guns on her and firing. The bolts of Laz energy passed her. She screamed at them, raising her hands. The guns in their hands suddenly came apart as if nothing more than pieces from a factory. She then raised her arms above her head, and large cords on the ceiling lashed down like living vines and snared the insurrectionists, frying them with the electric currents coming from them. The doctor was screaming, clamoring on and on about getting things under control, but he was powerless. Before a Zerathon, even a technolocutor was no match. I couldn't stay here if I wanted to live. I had to escape. I turned and fled from the laboratory as fast as I could as the ceiling and walls shook and quaked at the wrath of the Zerathon. I reached the large metal doors that I'd originally come in through, but they were barred shut. I beat them hard with my fists, looking around desperately for a switch or a button to open it, only to realize it was likely powered by the doctor. So I was trapped. With no way out, I leaned against the large cold metal and whimpered. Trapped. No way out but to face whatever this monster had in store for me. As I sank to my knees, shivering from fear and the cold, I finally heard her walking out to where I sat. I saw her standing there, her body shimmering like liquid metal, her eyes taking me in and her body both alluring but horrifying.
Earth child, she spoke.
Don't hurt me.
That is not my intention.
I was slightly surprised. In all the stories I'd heard about the Zerathons, I'd always expected them to be frightening, horrifying creatures, like demonic entities wreathed in electricity, lightning, and terror, and yet this creature seemed nothing short of demure, like something that had walked out of a dream itself. Who are you? I asked. The Zerathon knelt down so we were at eye level and I could gaze into her brilliant, black, dazzling pupils.
There are no words in your tongue to say my identity. Call me what you wish.
We call your kind Zerathons.
Yes.
A shadow of a smirk crept onto her face.
A name hailing to our ancient roots. Then you may call me Zera.
Zera. Well, what do you want from me?
Answers, she said. I have not been active for the last 6,486 standard years. Much has changed, and I would know it.
Why? Planning to revive the Zerathons and destroy humanity?
Zera looked at me for a few moments before shaking her head. I have no such intention. I only wish to learn, as my people have always wanted.
But the GCU, the Union, they say you were dangerous and destructive, that you're a race of barbarous creatures.
When the Galactic Exploration Initiative of Earth discovered our people 7,000 years ago, our technology and abilities surpassed human understanding. War broke out. My kind are not warriors. We were not prepared for the military of your people. We went into hiding, but the Galactic Exploration Initiative was able to corner us and destroy many of our fortresses and places of retreat.
The Galactic Exploration Initiative was the original name for the exploration fleets that Earth sent out to explore the galaxy before the GCU was founded. It was said on Earth that the Zerathons had started a long and bloody war with humanity, that humanity was forced to use unconventional methods of war to defeat them. Could it be possible that wasn't quite the case? Had humanity gone further than conventionally necessary to eradicate a perceived threat? It wasn't impossible, and I knew all too well that humanity was capable of that. So you want revenge, then? You want to get back at us?
I have no such intention, she answered. The purpose of our race, as laid down by our Creator, Adonai, is to chronicle, learn, explore, and discover. We were designed to prepare the galaxy for the Earth children. I wish to continue my mandate.
Adonai? Purpose? What? I don't understand.
That has always been the weakness of Earth children. A failure to understand and a fear of doing so.
Her face seemed somehow sad at that.
It is this fear that has led to the fall of my people. I would like to know more of my kind live. Will you help me?
Help you? Why would I help you? I have to report this to the GCU. I have to... She was smiling at me, making me pause my statement.
You freed me when you didn't need to. You could have left me at the mercy of that madman. You did not. I trust there is faith in you. A faith in what you are not always sure of. That alone leads me to have faith in you as well.
I sat there stunned in silence. I didn't know what scared me more, that the Zerathons of legend might still be alive, or the fact that this one was really making me want to trust her. I feel like I'm really going to regret this. And that is Zera. And Jay really liked that one, as I recall. Told me he really appreciated it and said he wanted to use Zerathons more in his story. Next up is Souls and Starships. Takes place in the exact same universe but with different characters. So, let's get to it.
Good morning, Adam.
Adam grit his teeth and rolled over in his bed, clenching his eyes shut and refusing to entertain the notion of opening them. The soft mechanical voice was not welcome now, not when he'd been having that dream again.
The time is 0825 in the morning. This is the designated time you...
Snooze! Snooze!
My apologies, Adam, but I cannot obey your request as this is your third...
Earth, help me! Fine! I'm already up! I'm up! Adam snapped, sitting up fast and throwing the sheets off him as he pressed his hands to his weary face, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, cheeks, and mouths.
You can be a real pest, you know that? My apologies, Adam, but there really is no need for insults. I'm simply doing as
I know, Adam groaned. Adam wanted to be mad, but it was a waste of energy, and he was too tired to expend any. He merely sat on the edges of his bed and let his bare feet slide down and touch the cool floor. He hissed at the sensation and staggered up to his feet. Adam was a tall man of about 6 feet and 2 inches. He was of a fit build, although he'd been a bit pudgier 2 years ago before he'd ended up here, which felt like a lifetime now. He walked about his room and took in the smell, very sparse space. It was a simple cabin for his ship. There was no need to overly decorate it, he used to think, but that was before he'd spent so long sailing the stars, drifting near aimlessly out in space. There were times he felt more like this was his home than his apartment he'd lived in back on Earth. Then his thoughts shifted back to that dream, and he clenched his eyes shut again, wanting to hone in on it. To feel it again. Like it was real. But like any dream, the images and moments blur, leaving only abstract, fragile edges to memories that will haunt Adam's mind for the rest of the day. He wasn't sure if he loved this dream or if he feared it. All he knew was that any time he was having it, he didn't want it to end. "What's been going on since I went to bed?" he asked loudly. "Any problems?"
All systems are performing at optimal levels, the voice said swiftly.
The voice was female and synthetic. It seemed to have the slightest trace of an accent just behind it, like some kind of English or French touch. Not enough to be too obvious, but just enough to draw the ear.
Power levels have dropped to 47%, however. The ship will require a visit to a port for recharge and redeployment to approximately 53 hours. Time to Mevalon 4 at current speed will take approximately 5 hours and 21 minutes.
"Is that a fact?" Adam asked absent-mindedly. He already knew that, which is why the ship was en route to Mevalon 4, a small trading moon in the Al Duo sector. It wouldn't be his first trip to a civilized world in almost 2 weeks, and yet he didn't feel all that joyous. He already knew the answers he would get, but he felt the need to ask anyway. "And how many days until we can go back to Earth?"
Approximately 535 days until you are cleared to return to Earth.
The voice answered Adam, and Adam groaned and walked out of his room and into the hallway that led to the rest of the ship. "Great," he growled.
You are displeased?
The voice asked, a note of concern etched into the words.
You ask for this information regularly, and it invokes that same unhappy attitude. Why ask for information if it is not what you wish to hear?
"It's complicated," Adam answered slowly. "Have the cockpit ready for me."
Affirmative.
He made his way down to the hull of his ship, the Void Star. It was an older model by about 30 years, a Viper-class star cruiser that he'd been given by the GCU when he'd first been hired. Back then, it'd been a newer model, almost a whole lifetime ago. Even now, though, he'd taken good care of this girl. She still flew like a dream, and she could keep pace with those newer fancy models like the Copperheads and the state-of-the-art Rattler-class jumpers. He had snorted the first time he'd seen one of those sleek ships. Some fancy planetary governor was gushing over it like it was a newborn baby, showing it off to the paparazzi of that poor, very out-of-the-way world. He didn't know who he was fooling anyway. Star cruisers were large enough to hold a crew of 5, could travel in a space at moderate power for at least a month without refueling, and had FTL drives that could go from base to light speed in 2 seconds, while Rattlers and Copperheads might boost better speed and distance. Nothing topped a Viper or even older Cobra-class models for reliability. But even the cruisers paled in comparison to the
Adam, are you all right?
Her voice bolted at him out of his silent thoughts. He had a lot of time for those in the lonely ship. He shook his head swiftly, realizing he'd been staring out at the wall of the corridor, his hand resting on a control panel. "I'm fine, Deefa," he answered.
If you insist, but I detect a slight palpitation of your heart when...
You know I hate it when you start reading out my bio readings like that. It makes me self-conscious.
I apologize, Adam.
Aoife answered. Adam hurried down the corridor and opened the cockpit door with a press of a button. The door slid aside to let him in, and Adam stepped carefully to the pilot chair. It was worn from years of use, and slight cracks were showing in the soft Grox leather. There was a small hololith standing on the left-hand side of the chair where a beautiful crystal orb sat. This was used for holographic messages and calls to be made to the pilot, though he rarely got any messages or calls these days. The only person who ever spoke to him on that was Aoife. With a sigh, Adam slid into the chair and strapped himself in. There was no need for him to pilot. The ship would sail on its own right for the starport of Mevalon 4 on autopilot. But having himself in the seat and his hands on the controls felt right somehow, and it gave him something to focus on. As he adjusted his seat, the hololith crystal suddenly glowed bright, and a figure appeared on top of it. It was a woman, The hologram of her made her body appear white, and she wore a military fatigue-style uniform that hugged her body close, showing her curvaceous figure. She had long hair tied in a ponytail that rested over her shoulder. Her ears were long and pointed like two knives sliding up above her head, but hugging the sides so they grew back up and rather than out. Her eyes were large and her pupils slightly bigger than a natural human's. The hologram of her was only about 10 inches in height, but the presence of this woman would be felt by Adam anywhere he went. This was Aoife.
You don't want me to pilot? She asked.
Why don't you do a routine systems check or something?
All systems are fully operational, performing within acceptable parameters, as I said before. Are you perhaps suffering from short-term memory loss? Hypothesis, you are maybe hungry and not entirely awake. Suggested course of action, why not get something to eat?
Adam gave an amused snort and glanced at the holographic woman hovering beside him. With anyone else, he'd think they were making fun of him, but with Aoife, he knew she wasn't. Aoife was an AI program that had been assigned to Adam 12 years ago. Back then, it had been an assignment he'd relished. Not just an officer in the GCUMC could he be given access to an AI assistant. They were only reserved for generals, high command staff, and of course, the Sentinel Knights. The reminder of that title caused Adam to turn his head longingly near the back of the cockpit to where a small banner hung near the door. On it was a golden shield with the Earth stationed in the center. Standing behind the shield was one paw resting on the top, a lion, with a great mane and a roaring maw. It was the emblem of the Sentinel Knights, the elite forces in the Galactic Central Union Military Corps. Sentinel Knights were given extraordinary privileges and were able to act outside of the normal chain of command, answering only to the Fleet Admiral himself, Ezekiel Zivan. These warriors were chosen from the military corps recruits who showed high aptitude and physical abilities, logical reasoning, adaptability, and tactical brilliance. Only the best could join the Knights, and with good reason. They were given the best armor, the best weapons, the best equipment, and even a personal ship to guide them to wherever the GCU needed. There was only 1,000 knights in service, a mere drop in the bucket, really, but necessary, as not only were knights expensive to train and equip, but their actions also had very large repercussions. Knights are only deployed to dangerous territories or to hunt down particularly hostile criminals, and most likely would engage in combat with the insurrectionists. To help them, all knights are given a crew to help man their ship, an AI assistant that could link into their armor, ship, and neural implants, and a set of Mark V destroyer body armor. Even now, he kept that armor clean and ready to wear, even though he knew he would never have reason to again. That thought alone made him inhale slowly, and then exhale in disgust.
You're doing it again,
Aoife said shortly. It wasn't supposed to be possible for an AI to have emotions or show mild irritation, and yet Adam had worked with Aoife so long he wondered if his humanity wasn't rubbing off on her, because he could practically taste the mockery in her voice. Doing what?
Staring at the Sentinel Knight banner.
I'm reminiscing about the past, Aoife.
What is the logic in that?
I didn't say it was logical. Adam shrugged as he turned off autopilot and started steering the ship.
May I speak freely?
Why not? Adam asked.
I worry about you, sir, Aoife said.
Adam shot her a look and then turned back to see the viewport. Think your old knight's going mad, are you?
Your mental faculties are all fully operational. I have no concerns regarding your mental state or physical state, but you are very sad.
Yes, I'm sad, Adam growled. I'm sad and I'm lonely. I've been away from home for 2 long years and I'm sick of being stuck out here in exile.
Correction, you are not alone. I have accompanied you these last 2 years, Aoife interjected.
Adam couldn't restrain another snort of amusement. You hardly count as company, he answered. There was a pause, and for a moment Adam thought perhaps Aoife hadn't heard him, until he realized she was pouting. Her holographic face had taken a hard, almost accusatory tone, like a mother disappointed in her child.
Pardon me, Adam. How do I not count?
Sorry, Aoife, I didn't mean to offend you. Didn't even really think AI could get offended.
I am capable of emotional response.
Yes, you cried with me when I got exiled because you were programmed to know when negative events elicit sadness. You laughed when I bumped my head in the shower because you were programmed to know a humorous occurrence should be followed by laughter, and you even snap at me and nag at me because you know the refusal to comply should be met with irritated responses. But you don't feel these things yourself. It was a harsh statement, and Adam knew it. And even after saying it, he felt guilty.
If I could feel them, would that make me better company?
Aoife asked. And by God above, Adam could actually hear the sadness in her voice. I'm sorry, Aoife. I shouldn't have said anything. He paused, the words dying on his tongue. I've never been away from Earth so long. And I'm homesick.
I understand, sir, and I apologize for being a pest.
Adam winced as she brought up his insult from earlier this morning. It was so shocking how human Aoife could be sometimes. Got any good books to read today? Adam asked.
Affirmative.
Aoife suddenly went quiet as she began sifting through books in her databank to read. Adam knew he shouldn't be so hard on her. She really had been the only person around he could talk to like this. When he'd first gotten her assigned to him, he saw her as nothing more than a talkative computer. But over these last 2 years, she had become something very close to human, even to the point he forgot sometimes she was just an AI. In a sense, she was the most loyal ally he had now. When a Sentinel Knight betrayed the GCU or committed a heinous form of treason, they were executed. That was the fate that had awaited Adam 2 years ago, a fate he didn't deserve. It had been a secret operation to uncover an insurrectionist group on a mining planet called Husk. The insurgents were planning to steal explosive ordnance used in the mining operations and turn them into weapons against the GCU. But the battle had gone out of control. The explosives detonated beneath the capital city of Ashker, leveling half the city and killing literally thousands in an instant. Adam had been the knight responsible for overseeing the mission. Of course, it hadn't been his fault. It was the insurrectionists and their mad machinations, but no one was interested in truth. They wanted blood. Fortunately for Adam, his fate was not in the hands of the GCU bureaucrats, but in the fleet admiral. Zyvan was a reasonable man and was smart enough to know Adam wasn't the man to blame, but he also knew just letting him off wouldn't help matters. So he did the next worst thing. Exilium Repentius, a repentant exile. An exiled knight is stripped of his crew and his GCU resources. They are then banned from Earth for a specific period of time and forced to float aimlessly in a region of space that Zyvan feels they can still be of use in. They cannot requisition forces, request GCU assets or information, and are essentially wandering vagabonds. They're still expected to answer distress calls and help where they can, but their ship and ID has a mark to indicate their status as a repentant exile, and this taboo makes them unwilling to support them. The price of their sins. If the knight survives the exile until the end of their term, they will return and be offered an appeal hearing and perhaps be given their title back. But some knights go stir-crazy from the solitude, and more than a few even defect to join the insurrectionists. That's why Exilium Repentius was a very rare punishment. But it was a testament to how much Zyvan trusted Adam that he implemented this. He knew Adam would never defect, and he was right. Adam would never betray Earth and the GCU. Never. It didn't mean he didn't resent them, though. But that resentment he kept only to himself, though he suspected Aoife already knew about it. She didn't ask him about it, though, and he didn't push anything. He leaned back in the cockpit chair, eyes half open, as he listened to Aoife read him another one of her massive collection of novels. It was boring, but it was welcome. After all, she didn't have to be here, and that thought, for the first time in 2 years, gave him pause. Aoife, Adam spoke up. Aoife stopped reading abruptly, and her figure appeared on the hololith.
Yes, Adam?
Why did you stay with me? He asked.
Aoife blinked twice before answering. You have asked me this before. I stayed with you because I have grown most accustomed to you and your mannerisms. Reassigning me to another knight would be a waste of time.
Aoife, tell me the rate of exiled knights returning to service after their exile.
GCU military records indicate that all exiled knights who return alive, only 12% return to full service, which is a very small number when you factor in that only 8% of exiled knights return alive and loyal.
Aoife answered with a shrug. Exactly, Adam finally said. The odds are low. You had to know that the chances of me coming back were incredibly low, and the chances of me staying a knight even lower than that. Yet you decided not to be reassigned and wanted to remain with me. That's an illogical choice. Why did you make that choice? Aoife, for a long moment, fell completely quiet. Adam turned his head and looked right at her, her wide eyes looking both tired, but also thoughtful. Aoife? Adam asked.
Forgive me, Adam. I find this question difficult to answer.
You don't know why you decided to stay with me? Adam asked, sheer surprise in his voice. AI were vastly intelligent, capable of incredible cognitive abilities, storing near limitless information, and they were logical to a fault. He'd never seen an AI that showed emotion or made irrational choices, and yet the more time he spent talking with Aoife, he had noticed these changes in her, these moments of near humanity.
When you were sentenced to exile, I was offered the chance to be stored until a new knight could replace you. It was a seemingly logical decision, but as I considered the parameters and possibilities of what kind of new master I would be assigned to, I realized
What?
they were not my friend.
Friend. AI were many things, but a friend? Adam had never considered that. Was Aoife his friend? You know I could die out here, and if that happens, you'll be stuck on the ship indefinitely until someone finds you.
This outcome has occurred to me, but I accept it.
Why? That's what I don't understand, Aoife. You're a support AI. You're not supposed to feel.
I feel very sad, Adam, Aoife finally confessed. When you were exiled, I was sad, and I cried for you. I even wrote and mailed very hostile letters of appeal to the tribunal on Earth without your permission. When you bumped your head in the shower, I laughed because it was funny. When you insult me or talk back to me, I feel irritated. I know that these should just be emotional processor responses, but they still cause me to feel.
Adam just stared, mouth half open. Was she cognizant? Aoife, do you know what a soul is?
Soul, a noun, defined as a spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal, regarded as immortal, often used in regards to mortal theologies. And
yes, that, Aoife, do you think maybe you... Alert! 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 The sound rocketed through the cockpit, and Adam found himself stopping his question to turn the terminal in front of him. A distress signal had reached the ship. Aoife, trace that signal.
Tracing. Located. Distress call from freighter ship Behemoth class, the Dauntless Will.
The Dauntless Will?
The Dauntless Will is a commercial ship used by aristocracy in this system for luxury and entertainment purposes. The distress signal indicates attacks from ships bearing insurrectionist iconography.
Adam cursed under his breath at the news. It wasn't hard to figure out what had happened. The Dauntless Will had gone out for a pleasure cruise, and it got targeted by some elements of the insurrectionists, looking to either steal from the passengers or take them hostage. He groaned and began punching in the coordinates for Aoife to send a command. There wasn't anything he could do. Without a crew to help him on the ship, he couldn't engage the enemy properly, and boarding the ship to engage in hand-to-hand or blaster-to-blaster was equally risky. He'd just have to send the distress signal to High Command and trust them to deal with it. Get ready to relay distress signal and coordinates, Adam sighed.
Adam, sir, before I do, I have the ident codes of the insurrectionist ship. 3 Dreadwolf-class strikers, small, lightly equipped.
It doesn't matter, Aoife. We have to get the official military support on this one.
But one of those ship is the Venomous Spite.
Adam froze. The Venomous Spite? You're sure?
Confirming. Acknowledged and confirmed. The 2nd Dreadwolf-class ship is the Venomous Spite, captained by Lucas Staller, insurrectionist lieutenant with a bounty of 4 million GCU credits on his head.
The money didn't matter to Adam. Only that name mattered, and Aoife knew that too. The last time he'd seen that bastard, it was in his dreams, in the underground tunnels of Husk beneath a doomed city, explosives surrounding him. That man, that fiend, he was the one who did this, the one who exiled him. Belay last order, lock onto the coordinates and prepare the FTL thrusters, Adam snapped.
Acknowledging command,
Aoife answered, and the ship suddenly hummed with life as the FTL drive fired up and the ship began to vibrate and prepare for the jump. What's our estimated arrival time?
28 minutes at max power.
That slow?
Sorry, sir.
It's fine. Do it. The sooner I close in on Staller, the better.
Acknowledged.
Adam reached for the lightspeed accelerator and punched it harder than probably necessary. He muttered a silent apology to the ship as it fired up and launched forward with a lurch. The world ahead of him suddenly went blurry with light as the ship slipped from real space and entered pure light speed.
Ship has successful jumped. Managing power output appropriately. I'm also releasing the maglocks of your armor, sir.
Good. Let's see if I remember how to put it on. Adam growled as he got out of his chair to let Aoife take over.
Shall I prepare the ship's weapons for imminent combat?
Not a bad idea, he acknowledged. Adam walked down the corridor of his ship until he came to a special steel closet jutting out of the wall like a giant black cylinder that had been built into his ship. He opened it with a few keys, punching the side, and it hissed open to show his glorious armor. The armor of a Sentinel Knight.
Adam, would you like me to accompany you through neural interface for the coming fight?
Aoife asked. Do what you feel is best, Aoife, Adam answered with a thoughtful smile. There was a long pause from Aoife and then a laugh.
Feel. I thought you said I couldn't do that.
I'm beginning to regret a lot of things I said about you, Aoife. So like I said, do what you feel is best.
I feel happy to hear you say that, sir.
I'll bet you do. You know something, Aoife? I'm feeling pretty happy too. What say we get some payback against that bastard?
That would make me feel even happier, Adam.
And that was Souls and Starships. Now, let me take a brief pause so I can go get something to drink, because I've been reading nonstop without any. Let me know in chat what you guys think of those two stories. Take a minute to catch my breath and to sip something. Now, I've got bad news. I haven't written the sequel to that. I'm saving it for Jay's birthday coming up, so it's not done yet. But there will be a sequel. There will be more about Adam and Aoife. I thought you guys might like Aoife. She was fun to write. All right. Now I have one more story for Jay about this world. This one is a different one, and I wrote it literally as my Christmas present for Jay. This was my Christmas present for Jay this year. It's called Ambition for Heaven. This one's called Ambition for Heaven. I wrote it this Christmas as Jay's Christmas present. Now, before I share it with you, I want to share something else with you. 1 second. Let me put something on the screen for you. All right, that should be good enough. I'll increase it just a bit. There we go. All right, so here's the story. So I asked Jay what it is I asked Jay, what would you like me to write for you for Christmas? And he said, hold on, and he sent me this picture. He drew this. This is a sample of Jay's artwork. And he said, I want you to write me a story based on this picture and make sure it has to do with my sci-fi world. He says, I drew this picture and I have no idea what's going on. And he says, I don't know the characters. I don't know the place. I don't know the names. All I know is I want it to be involved in my sci-fi story and I want you to write it. Can you do that? And I said, okay, I will try. And so I took this picture and I wrote a story for him, and that's what you're going to hear now. It is called Ambition for Heaven. Here we go. The world was called Perfidia. Find it on a star chart. You'd see a meaningless speck in the middle of a vast network of worlds owned by the GCU and contested over with the insurrectionists. Learn about it in a Schola classroom, and a stuffy professor might tell you it's a necessary peace and stability in the GCU, a symbol of authority, law, and justice in a mad and chaotic galaxy. You learn all about the planet's history, its early discovery only 223 years after humanity began its colonization mission, about the frequent insurrectionist attacks on that world for resources and other unknown reasons. You might even learn about the great fortress on that world known as the Castel. What you wouldn't learn is the true nature of that fortress, or just how deep it went. You wouldn't even learn who lived in that fortress. If you did, you wouldn't call it the Castel, as the GCU archives do. You'd call it by what its occupants call it. Hell. Ember crawled her way through the maintenance shaft. Her hair was oily and filthy, just like the rest of her body. but she'd kept having to run a gloved hand over her brow to push strands of it out of her face. She gripped a wrench tightly in her own one hand as she saw the source of the leaking pipeline above her. She grimaced as she realized she couldn't reach it. "Hey, Frankie, give me a boost, huh?" she asked. There was no response. She turned around with a frustrated grunt. "You hear me, big guy?" The large, hulking brute behind her finally turned his head from the floor beneath him. He was huge, bigger than most normal men. His body was a series of metal alloy pieces and parts with powerful carapace ligaments. His eyes were large, glowing white circles on his head, with one blinking sporadically every so often. Each move he made was a series of hisses, clinks, and whirs of old and rusty pieces and parts moving. The only part of him that wasn't mechanical was a single gray beanie on his head that fell just above his ocular receptors. "Forgive my slow response," Frankie answered in a broken and static voice of machine. "I was thinking." Ember raised an eyebrow at this but didn't question it. She just stepped back towards the pipe. "It's fine. Just lift me up, please." "Directive acknowledged." Frankie approached and placed his metal fingers around Ember's hips, lifting her up as though she were made of feathers. Ember let out a squeak of shock at how fast she rose up, almost banging her head on the pipe above her. Regaining her composure, she got to work tightening the loose bolts in the pipe. "So, what were you thinking about?" "I was running through diagnostics on my current functionality," he answered. "Oh?" Ember asked absentmindedly. "Learn anything nice?" "I discovered nothing of beneficial value. Diagnostics indicate that I am able to function beyond a mere 68% full capacity. Maintenance is long overdue for this unit." "Well, I'm afraid that unless we come across an engineering team with the parts you need, we'll just have to make do," Ember answered with a grunt, finally tightening the bolt until the pipe was realigned and the stream of sign ceased. "All right, you can put me down." "Directive acknowledged," Frankie answered, lowering Ember back to the ground again. "You don't have to say that every time, you know," Ember teased, patting the big metal chest of Frankie's as she set her wrench back into her pants pocket. "Got any word on Sophie and Jax?" "Processing." "Negative. Where were they intended to be?" "Well, I told Jax to keep an eye on Sophie while she went to get lubricant for when we get to the engine room on level C63, Ember answered. "But they've been gone a while. I swear, if he's gotten her lost to play a prank, I'll kick his—" "You'll do what?" A voice caught Ember by surprise as she turned to see another figure approaching from out of the low, smoky passageway. He was thin with sharp features and long, oily black hair like hers. He had a bored sort of expression, as if he wasn't taking anything around him seriously. He had a nice-sized gash under his neck running under his shirt, and Ember's eyes narrowed at it. The gash was an ugly white color like new scar tissue. She knew what had caused that. "Where's Sophie, Jax?" "She's fine." "I asked you where," Ember pressed. Jax approached before he could say anything sarcastic or cold, all pause at the sound of running feet. Frankie raised his head as his ocular receptors blinked into the dark pathway. "Sophie is en route," he explained helpfully. No sooner had he said this than out of the dark a little girl came running, wearing an oversized coat over her shoulders and a big worker's hat that kept slipping over her eyes. She was carrying a big can of black lubricant from the engine room pistons. Her big baby blue eyes seemed to twinkle like little sapphires in the dirty grime on her face. Her blonde hair looked almost brown from the junk in it, but there was a big smile on her little face that eased the tension in Ember's heart. "I got the lubricant," she called, her little lisp practically melting Ember's heart. "Where were you? Why'd Jax ditch you?" Ember demanded, rounding her glare on Jax, who held up his hands. "Why would you gonna assume it's my fault?" he growled. "History would indicate that when unfortunate circumstances befall us, it is you that is at the epicenter of the issue," Frankie remarked, causing a snort from Ember and a giggle from Sophie. "Well, shit, when did the Tin Man get a sense of humor?" Jax gawked, unable to believe he'd heard what he had. "I was not attempting comedy," Frankie answered simply. "I was answering your query." "And that's what makes it funny, big guy," Ember snickered. "But seriously, though, what happened? I thought you two would be back earlier. If we don't hit that engine room on level C, Sharp is going to give us hell." "Then let's not waste time. Quit pointing fingers at me," Jax snapped, turning around.
"Well, I know, eh?" Sophie offered helpfully, hurrying to lead them down the path. "Frankie, go help the kid so she doesn't bump into anything that she shouldn't," Ember asked.
"Directive acknowledged," Frankie answered, marching ahead of her and Jax to catch up to the pint-sized little Sophie, who barely came up to Frankie's thigh. As Ember picked her tool bag, duffel bag, and slung it over her shoulder, she walked by Jax and gave him a look before her eyes went to the scar she noticed.
"All right, Jack. Out with it."
"Don't know what you're talking about."
"The scar," she snapped. "You didn't have it when you left with Sophie an hour ago. You were at the business end of a phase flail, and Sophie's not in tears right now, so she obviously wasn't." Out with it.
What's it matter? The twerp's fine, so let it go. Jax tried to push past Ember before she reached above and shoved her fist against the scar, making Jax wince.
Gah! Talk already. Fine.
It was Hannibal and Sadie. They saw me but didn't see Sophie, and they called for me. I pretended to ignore them while telling the kid to catch up with her later and sent her ahead of me.
You ignored Hannibal.
I know, stupid move. He had Sadie give me a good lash for it. But I had to. You know how they treat the twerp. Ember bit her lip, remembering the last time any of the corrections officers had got hold of Sadie.
Thank you, Jax.
I don't know why you think I'm a heartless bastard, Jax grumbled, continuing to follow after Frankie's hulking frame.
I never assumed you were,
Ember countered. If you say so. Jax shrugged, leaving Ember to pout in frustration.
Jax was difficult, but she couldn't entirely blame him for his attitude. A lot of the citizens of the Castell were similar. All of them were cold, bitter, and harsh, the hope and compassion driven out of them by years of isolation and condemnation. The Castell, in fact the entire world of Perfidia, was a prison. Perfidia was the first and only prison world of the Galactic Central Union. Mankind had learned to populate the stars, but as more and more planets became hospitable worlds for humanity, the population rate surged. Obviously, criminals, pirates, and dissidents would become a problem, so the Galactic Central Union created a convenient means to deal with those prisoners. Perfidia was a massive world rich with ore, minerals, and materials necessary to build spacecraft and life support systems for exploration and planetary living. The Castell is the mining and refinery fortress specifically meant to extract and prepare the materials for use. Over the decades of growth, use, and influence, the Castell has grown outrageously huge. Like a massive anthill, the fortress goes deep underground in networks of pathways, compartments, mining tunnels, and refineries. The whole thing now dwarfs some countries in overall size, and, like any country, there are millions of people who call it home. But most of these people are the criminals of the GCU who've been conveniently left here to serve their term in service. The criminals here are not idle. Rather, they work. From day until night, or at least what they're told is day and night, for the prisoners are not allowed on the surface to see the sky. They'll work and toil and pay for their dues, whether it's in maintaining the fortress's massive network of pathways and systems, whether it's mining the previous minerals ore, whether it's processing and refining the material, or whether it's moving the product for shipping. The prisoners of the Castell are always working and often treated as chaff and slave labor. Would the GCU change things if they knew the conditions the prisoners lived in? Who knows? Because almost no prisoners ever see the sky again after leaving the Castell, and those very few that do serve their time and go free often never leave Perfidia to inform the GCU of anything. Almost all the people of the Castell have accepted their lot and determined this is where they would live and where they would die, developing a sort of culture within the Castell, a culture of pessimism, selfishness, and detachment. If there is a hell, then the Castell is the gateway to it. It was the evening shift, and Ember's crew was finally able to take their sleep period. Sleep was limited to 6 hours, which was barely enough time, but they'd grown used to it. Ember lay in her cot, her eyes closed as she tried to sleep, but her mind was still abuzz with thoughts. She opened her eyes, staring up at the bunk above her own, and then turned her head to look at the one next to them. The top of the opposite bunk's at Jax's bed, but the bottom bunk was too small for Frankie to sleep on, so he just sat and powered down in between the beds, which left the top of Ember's own bunk for Sophie, and as she turned her face back to look upward, she saw a strand of blonde hair dripping over the edge of the bunk. Ember smiled to herself. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. Slowly the hair dipped further into view, and behind it came Sophie's little head, shaking her head apologetically. "What's wrong, kid?" "Ember, tell me again about the stars." Ember's smile faded. "Sophie, it's late." "I know, I always ask, but it's really important," Sophie whispered. Ember sighed and rolled her eyes in exasperation. Unlike Jax and Sophie, Ember had actually seen the surface, the sky, and she would never forget it, and she would tell them about it. Jax never seemed interested, but Sophie clung to every word. "All right. Close your eyes, Sophie." Sophie did so, smiling excitedly. "All right. Now that darkness, you see it? Imagine it lit up with small pinpricks of light. Just beautiful white light. Now, imagine them everywhere, all over that blackness, making swirls like clouds and vapor. Picture purple, red, and yellow mist drifting among it like gorgeous tapestry." "What's a tapestry?" Sophie asked. "It's a picture," Ember remembered, lost in her own description. "And every one of those stars, every one is another world. Far, far away from this one." "Wow. What do you think those worlds look like? Are they big and metal and stuff like the Castile? No, I don't think so, Ember giggled. No, I don't think it's possible for any place to be as awful as this one. But you're from another world, right, Ember? What was it like? Sophie asked. Ember frowned deeply and rubbed her brow. It's not something I want to talk about. Why not? Sophie asked.
Rule 1, kid, Jack spoke up from his bunk. We don't talk about the reason we're here. It's easier that way.
I didn't know that rule, Sophie mumbled sadly. Why is that a rule? Because it keeps things secret, Ember answered. Sophie, a lot of folks here were born here, and others were sentenced here. Some of the prisoners discriminate between those born here and those who were sentenced. What does discriminate mean? Sophie struggled to say the word.
To dislike or create division, sorting others by qualities beyond or within control. Frankie spoke up as he began to lift his head.
Ember nodded. Yeah, that. But does it matter? I don't mind where you're from. There was a long, awkward silence before Sophie turned to Frankie. Frankie, how did you get here?
This unit was assigned to owner Roderick Beige for the function of bodyguard for 3 standard years. On July 8th, 4521, this unit witnessed owner Roderick Beige kill a man who was not willing to be extorted. This unit is incapable of deception, and as such, the owner had me sold to this facility where the authorities would not discover me.
So you've been outside to the outside world too, Sophie cried.
Affirmative, but this unit is not adept at descriptive narratives as Ember is.
Sophie smiled broadly at Frankie and then looked at Ember and Jax. Your turns.
What's to tell? Jack asked. I was born here. My old man was a rotten gangster, and my mom, whoever she was, didn't care enough to look out for me, and she shat me into this shithole. Only life I've ever known was this place, same as you, kid.
Sophie frowned sadly, and Ember gave Jax a cross look. Nothing he'd said was false, but it was tactless saying that to Sophie, and he knew it. He just didn't care. She'd salvage this for Sophie. Well, the world I was from, Sophie, was called Sand Lane. It was a beautiful world with green grass, blue skies, lots of trees of so many colors it would make your head spin.
Jack snorted, and Frankie looked up at Ember curiously. Forgive this unit, but Sand Lane... Shut it, Frankie, Jax growled. Let her finish.
Ember gave a thankful nod to Jax before resuming her story. The beauty of Sand Lane, the gorgeous mountains with red cliffs and cloudy mist that rolled along the tops, the birds as big as Sophie was with long beaks and bulbous blue eyes, the horses with 8 legs instead of 4 like she'd heard about in stories, story after story until at long last Ember stopped seeing Sophie had fallen fast asleep, a smile on her face. Ember sighed and lay back in her bed, Jax just glaring at the ceiling. Thanks for the save, Jax.
You shouldn't lie to the kid, Jax remarked.
Oh, and you're the pinnacle of virtue.
I'm prison scum, Jax remarked. But at least I don't gotta lie to save some little kid's feelings. You should have told her the truth.
Let's just get some rest, all right? We got work tomorrow.
Ember lay back and rolled over, wishing that Jax could shut up for once. Because, sadly, he was right. Sand Lane wasn't a paradise world. Not anymore. All right, get up! Ember was shaken from her sleep by the loud bellow coming from the entryway to their barracks. She wasn't the only one moving. Sophie above her was scrambling down from her bed, and Jax was groggily sitting up and seeing who it was that had been disturbing their sleep. Ember grimaced. She didn't have a clock on her person, but it felt too early for their shift to start. It also didn't match the normal wake-up call. Ordinarily, a prison guard would knock on the doors and announce that it was time to get up and to make their way to mess and then get ready for work. But this time there was no knock, but instead a man standing at the door with a small squad of provosts behind him. He stood wearing a black uniform with red collar and gold trim along the edge of his folded cuffs. He had on a matching black cap with a red stripe coming across it, and on its crest was an ID that read, Vice Warden Hannibal. He had a low-hanging brow and a mean face, even when smiling, promised pain and misery to others who crossed him. He was an oddly shaped man with a rail-thin and lanky set of arms, but his chest was broad, his belly poking out some. His face held a mustache that fell just under his nose and was trimmed close to the point of being pencil-thin. He had a wicked grin on his face, which was never a pleasant sight. Beside him, smiling as well, was another uniformed figure, but this one was a woman. She had pale skin but deep ginger hair that was tied in a bun at the back just beneath her cap. She had one normal eye, but her left eye was missing, replaced with an augmetic implant that made it look like an angry red orb which was stuck in place. This was Sadie, Hannibal's right hand. According to rumors, she was once a prisoner like they were, but she'd been a double-crossing snake who turned in her fellow prisoners for infractions and curried special favor. There were also rumors that she had inappropriate relationships with Hannibal, which could have been true, as the two were almost always working together. What was known, though, is she hated the prisoners with a passion, taking deep pleasure in administering punishment. And if anyone drew attention to her fake eye, she'd threaten to take theirs out, too. "I said, get up, you vermin!" Hannibal barked.
"You heard him," Sadie agreed. "On your feet for inspection."
Inspection? But it wasn't nearly early enough for that. Yes, all prisoner barracks were inspected bi-monthly, but the last one had been 4 days ago. She didn't argue, though, and stood up from her bunk beside Frankie and Sophie. The guards followed in and began walking around the room and searching for contraband or inappropriate items. Hannibal walked around waiting for something to be found. "Pardon the inquiry," Frankie spoke up, "but if there is something specific you seek, perhaps we can be of assistance in locating—" "If I want your suggestions or assistance, Tin Man, I'll beat it out of you," Hannibal snapped. He then turned his back on them. "But if you must know, we got a tip that someone in this work sector was smuggling mineral extract into their quarters. We're checking for it." Ember's eyebrows furrowed. Who'd be dumb enough to do something like that? The mineral deposits on this planet were plentiful and valuable, true, but prisoners would gain nothing by hoarding them. You had no place to sell them off. Maybe some idiot thought he was near his parole and could make some quick money if he snuck it out. Fat chance of that. You get searched very carefully for that kind of stuff, and if they find it, they beat you severely and throw you back in the clink.
"So if you don't find anything, you'll leave us alone?" Ember snapped. "We need to get back to sleep." "I don't like your cheek, bitch," Sadie hissed, rounding on Ember fast and drawing a neural whip from her belt. "Do I need to remind you of your place, little bitch?" "No need for that, Sadie," Hannibal grunted. "Even if we don't find the contraband, they may know the real culprits." "What, do you expect us to know every other prison in our sector?" Jack growled. "That's almost 200 names right there." Hannibal didn't answer that. He simply walked around and watched the guards rip open drawers, check under beds and chests, until suddenly one of them lifted Sophie's mattress and paused. "Hey, boss, look at this." Hannibal walked over, and the guard handed him a few sheets of paper. They were worn and wrinkled. Sophie squeaked, and Ember shot her a look. Hannibal looked at the papers and then sneered. "What is this?" he snarled. They're mine," Sophie whimpered. Hannibal turned them over for the others to see, and Ember's eyes widened. They were pictures. Hand-drawn pictures. Each one depicting various settings and visuals. An open field of bright green grass and little flowers drawn on them. Another depicted a series of spiky, dark brown spires, likely meant to be buildings to a city. With each one, Ember felt a pang of emotion strike her, because in each image the sky was the same, pitch black with specks of white stars, misty, vaporous purple and red clouds. Sophie had been drawing the sky and the worlds that Ember had been sharing with her. Ember held back tears as she realized the truth. Sophie wanted to hear her stories, so she could draw them. That's what she was always working on. That's why she insisted on a story every night. Ember held back her tears as Hannibal looked them over. "They're yours, are they? Paper is restricted." "Actually," Frankie spoke up again, "under Castell Code 5, Article 3, Paragraph 9, quote, items such as paper, pens, pencils, and other such utensils are regulated and allowed within the parameters that the item are kept only within the confines of the prisoner's living quarters." "Did he give you permission to speak, you ugly bucket of bolts?" Sadie snapped, cracking the neural whip with a loud, buzzing hiss. "If you punish Sophie for it," Ember growled, "we'll report it to the warden." For a brief moment, every guard in the room gave a rigid shiver, as they had a distant urge to jump to attention. Even Hannibal seemed suddenly flustered and uncomfortable. The warden was the most feared person in all of the Castile, by both prisoners and guards. She wouldn't be pleased if she was bothered by something as trivial as paper confiscation and punishment. Hannibal furiously began muttering and cursing under his breath. Then, a strange glint got in his eyes, and he walked over to Sophie and knelt down so that they were at eye level. "All right, sweetie, how about I make you a deal?" he asked in a mockingly gentle voice. "You like drawing the outside world? How would you like to go to it?" Every pair of eyes in the room were now on Sophie and Hannibal as shock fell over them in a quiet hush. Was Hannibal really offering what they thought he was? You were born in this prison, yes? Hannibal asked. So you're guilty of nothing more than relation to your scumbag parents. Ordinarily, without ID or GCU authentication, you would waste away in this prison with no hope of leaving. You don't exist outside these walls. But in rare circumstances, we offer new lives to inmates like you for good behavior or cooperation. So let's make a deal, kid. You tell me who's been stealing the mineral extracts, and I'll arrange for your immediate release. Is this some sick joke to you? Jack snarled. Shut it! Sadie snapped at him, but Ember couldn't blame Jax for his outrage. This was cruel. Hannibal would never honor this agreement, even if Sophie did have the information he wanted. But he knew Sophie didn't have it. And now her mind was desperately trying to come up with an answer to his question. I don't know who has the minerals, she answered. Hannibal sighed and raised the first image, the one with the brown spires, and then tore it in front of Sophie's face. Jax hissed furiously. Ember had to stop herself from lunging. Sophie bit her lip as tears built up. Hannibal picked up the next picture, one with a great green ocean with fish swimming in it. Who has the minerals? I don't know. Another paper ripped and tossed aside. Sophie's body was shaking as tears rolled down her face. Hannibal picked up another, the one with the bright green grass. Let's try this again. Who has the mineral extract? I don't know. He ripped it before she even had the chance to answer. He didn't care if she knew because he knew she didn't know anything. He just wanted to torture her. He wanted to make her suffer. Ember was gritting her teeth in a fury. Hannibal repeated this process 3 more times until he came upon the very last picture. This was almost a pitch black picture, save for the various stars, planets, and moons that could be seen on it. It was just a drawing of the night sky, as Ember had described it. The sight of it made Sophie squeal and reach out her hands for it, tears rolling from her cheeks. No, please not that one. It's my favorite. It's my first, please. Oh, it's your favorite, he asked with a sneer. Well, in that case, he held out his hand to Sadie, who laughed, pulling from her coat a gold cigar lighter. He opened and lit the lighter and held the light dangerously close to the corner of the paper. Sophie was in hysterics, half sobbing, half begging as she tried to reach for her precious picture. Tell me where the thief is. Just tell me. Tell me and you can have it back. And you can go see the sky for yourself. You son of a bitch! Amber couldn't contain herself. This is too much! Stop torturing her! Torture? Hannibal asked devilishly. Why, I haven't touched the poor girl, and all she has to do is just tell me what I want to know. But I don't know, Sophie bawled, shaking and reaching helplessly for her paper. I swear, if I knew, I'd say it. I'd tell you. Just give it back, please. Hannibal tutted mockingly and raised the cigarette lighter. It happened so fast that Ember blinked and almost missed it. In a moment, Hannibal was knocked to the ground with outstanding force, blood dripping from his mouth as Jack stood over him, fist out and jaw set. His eyes, slightly hidden by his hair, were screaming murderous intent. The paper, unburnt, fluttered to the ground, and Sophie screamed, running to take it. Sadie and her guards instantly rounded on Jax to attack him, but before they could reach him, Frankie stood up and blocked their path, his large metallic frame an intimidating presence that even made the hardened guards take pause. You want the thief? Jax finally snapped. It's me! I stole the damn minerals! Jax! Ember cried. No, he didn't do it, Sophie agreed, hugging her paper to her chest. Shut up, both of you! What do you two know anyway? I'm prison scum. I steal things. That's what I do. So do your worst, you ugly one-eyed witch. Sadie snarled from behind Frankie's form as Hannibal picked himself up. He knew that none of them were the culprit, but Jax had just hit him, so it didn't matter. Jax had done it. He'd crossed the line. Out of the way, robot, he growled, spitting blood. Men, take that rat shit to Chamber 4. I'll be there momentarily. Frankie clearly didn't want to move, but as Hannibal came closer, Jax walked out from under him. No need to keep me safe, big guy. I'm not scared of this gutter scum, Jax challenged. Jax, don't be an idiot, Ember cried, but there was no point when the guards grabbed Jack's arms and dragged him out of their quarters with Hannibal right behind them. Sadie stayed behind to pick up her fallen lighter before rounding on Sophie and making a move to take the paper. Hey, Jax turned himself in. Leave her alone, Ember argued. It was Jax who gave himself up. The kid never answered the question, so the paper burns. Ember threw herself forward to block Sadie. You bitch! Ember finally growled, her hand going for the wrench that was always in her pocket. She knew it was dangerous. She knew it was stupid, but she just couldn't take this anymore. She was going to stop her. Sadie, pleased to see the resistance, grabbed her neural whip and struck out at Ember. Ember had been struck by this whip before, but it was never something she could get used to. The whip was covered in small electric barbs that, when striking flesh, would not only rip into the body, but also pulse out several volts of electricity each. The result was excruciatingly painful and left angry scars. Ember shrieked as the whip struck her shoulder and she dropped, grabbing her injured arm and shoulder. Sadie drew back her hand to strike again, but this time she was stopped by a huge metal arm that caught the whip. I'm afraid this is unsanctioned and unprovoked violence, and will be considered prisoner abuse. I will report it, Miss Sadie. Get out of my way, you overgrown! Further abusive actions taken will result in self-defense measures being necessary. This unit advises you to not proceed with this course of action any further, or this unit will deploy self-defense measures. Sadie wasn't listening. She yanked the whip free and struck at Frankie, only for Frankie to knock the whip aside and then plunge his gargantuan fist into her stomach. Sadie let out a loud cough and gasp as the wind was blown from her lungs, and then she was launched out of the room and crashing into the opposite metal wall with the sound of a bell resounding. She slumped over and lay still, unmoving and out cold. Sophie was crying now as she hugged her final picture and lamented the ripped ones on the floor. Ember dropped down beside her and wrapped her in an embrace to comfort her. Get back in bed, Sophie, and you keep that drawing safe, all right? Ember whispered. Inquiry. Are we going to retrieve Jax or report this to the warden? Frankie asked. All of what has transpired here is I'm going to rescue Jax, Ember answered angrily. You stay here and keep an eye on Sophie. Going to the warden won't do us any good. I doubt she even knows about this or cares. Don't I, though? Ember, Frankie, and Sophie all spun to the door where a new figure stood. One that Ember had only seen once before, on the day she was brought here. She was a woman of about 6 feet in height, long black hair as black as a raven's wing, her eyes a deep blood red, her face, though mature, showed few of the expected age lines a woman like her might show. She likely had rejuvenate treatments to keep her looking pristine. She had squared shoulders, her uniform was elaborate, a deep black with red cuffs, leather boots, and a hat on her head with the symbol of the GCU eagle on the chest. Her uniform was almost military in appearance, but there were rumors she was a former commander in the GCU exploratory fleet. She was Warden Kaguya Tsukiyama. Ember went rigid looking at her and didn't move as she strode in. Her eyes went to the ripped papers on the ground and the droplets of Hannibal's blood near it where Jax had punched him. She then turned her gaze to Sadie, who was out cold in the hall, and finally to Sophie. She walked to Sophie slowly and then held out her hand. May I see your picture? She asked. It's mine, Sophie whimpered. Ember bit her lip in fear. Sophie, I know it is, darling, Warden Tsukiyama replied softly, though her red eyes did not shift. But I would like it if you gave it to me. I promise I will not rip it or burn it. Fearfully, Sophie began to hold out her paper to the warden, who took it surprisingly carefully. Please, was all Sophie would squeak out as the warden examined the picture. She stared for a long moment and then looked back at Sophie. Not a bad attempt. She then handed it back to her. But in future, I would be more careful to not let others take what is yours, even me. If you value something highly, you must guard it with your very life. Otherwise, it wasn't worth all that much in the end, was it? Her eyes then went to Ember. Your name, Ember, correct? Your stories are what inspired this young artist, is that not so? Yes, ma'am. You were one of the refugees from Saint-Lan, as I recall, she asked. Ember winced but nodded. How did you know that? It is likely because of the internal microphone and audio recording software installed in this unit, Frankie answered. My model is programmed to hear and record sound so that, in the case a client is assaulted, the voice of the attacker might be recorded as evidence in the crime. It was specifically this trait which made this unit's former owner afraid to keep me, and he sold me to the Castell. The warden has likely repurposed this piece of hardware for her own purposes of subterfuge. Now, Frankie, Warden Tsukiyama chuckled. Let's not give away all my little secrets. But yes, he's substantially correct. You were spying on us? Sophie asked. Not you specifically, dear, the warden smiled, but on your bunkmate Jax and you, Ember. Us? Jax's father was a major player in the insurrectionist movement, Warden Tsukiyama explained. We didn't know how much of his father's activities he may have shared with his son, so we were listening to see if he might share any, and as for you, you're certainly no criminal, Miss Ember, but your family were refugees of San Lan, which means you definitely were not above suspicion. After all, more than half of the fleeing refugees were sympathizers to the insurrectionists. So wait, you were listening to see if two insurrectionist brats decided to share secret family knowledge? Ember grumbled. Well, sorry, but I don't know or care anything about that. I agree, Warden Tsukiyama sighed. And it seems that the same could be said for Jax. I've yet to hear him divulge anything useful in the last several years. If you've been listening to us, then you know what just happened, Ember cried. You have to help Jax, Sophie added. I will do no such thing, Warden Tsukiyama replied coldly. Hannibal's actions were despicable, but Jax unquestionably brought this punishment on himself by attacking him. I can't do anything about it. She turned on her heels to walk out. They could kill him, Ember cried. The warden paused for just a moment, then turned her head slightly to see Ember. Do you remember what I said, young lady? If you value something, then guard it with your life. Otherwise, it's not worth that much, is it? How valuable is that boy to you? Ember paused and took in the warden's words with a look of astonishment. The warden then rummaged through her coat and pulled out a strange black and red device and dropped it on the ground. Do me a favor, would you? Don't kill Hannibal. That idiot is always giving me more work and hassle than I care for. I want to deal with that fool personally. And without another word, the warden marched off. Frankie lumbered forward and picked up the small red and black object, inspecting it carefully. This is an emergency evacuation master key. It gives access to the escape shuttle bay. It gives us what? Ember cried. According to the designation, it is the property of Vice Warden Hannibal. Ember couldn't believe what she was seeing. The warden knew they wanted to save Jax, and was not only allowing it, but then gave them the key to their escape. Was she letting them go? Maybe she's nicer than I thought, Sophie whispered. Ember doubted it. Perhaps she was compassionate enough to realize the wrong done to her and Sophie, but she wasn't too generous either. She wasn't sure the warden Tsukiyama couldn't lift a finger if they were caught or shot by the guards while making their escape. If anything, she was using this as a way to deal with Hannibal. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. She already knew what she had to do. Frankie, take Sophie and whatever else you two can carry and get to the escape shuttles. Use the key to get yourselves in and find a ship to get us out of here. Do not let anything bad happen to Sophie. You may have to kill guards if they try to stop you. Lethal authorization recognized and approved. Inquiry. What is your destination? I'm going to save Jax, Ember answered. We're leaving here. Together. Jax! Ember screamed as she tore through the hallways towards the discipline chamber. It was where Hannibal took workers or servants who weren't doing their job, and it was where he took them to punish them. She'd been in there a few times, though Jax was more familiar with it than she was. She was running hard, pushing past confused and exhausted workers and crews as she busted through a door still hanging off its hinges. One security officer tried to stop her, and perhaps once she might have stopped and submitted, but this time she pulled her wrench and swung it with all her might, hearing a satisfying crack as the hard metal met skull. The officer sank to the ground, and Ember didn't even glance back as she kept her eyes focused on the door ahead. The door to where Jax had been taken. With a scream of fury, she charged and kicked open the door with all her strength. To her surprise, the door gave way without much effort. She would have pondered this, but she saw something inside that made her scream. Jax was laying on the floor, body bloody and beaten. His eyes were closed, his hair was coated red. She let out a scream and ran to him, dropping down beside him. Jax! Jax, it's me! Get up! Ember, he cried. Shit! What are you doing here? Getting you out of here. Where's Hannibal? Right here, you little bitch! Before she could respond, a sharp crack of energy struck Ember in the shoulder. She screamed at the lash of the neural whip and then rolled again. Hannibal stepped out of the shadows, his pudgy face a mixture of triumph and grim fury. I knew you'd come running to save him. I knew the minute I walked out you'd try something stupid, and I'm glad. Oh, I'm so very glad. You twisted bastard! Ember shrieked, raising her wrench. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to take your crap anymore. Oh, I know you're not. That defiant look in your eye, those stupid drawings of the girls.
I have no doubt it was you who put those silly ideas in her head about the stars. You've got too much fire in you. I don't know why you wouldn't just break like the other inmates, but this right here, he raised his arms to indicate the performance around him, breaking into the detention hall, busting through the discipline chamber, and going so far as to knock out a provost. Oh, you've buried yourself now, brat. Ember knew he was right. He had the right to kill them now. She'd crossed every line imaginable, and yet she found it all so tedious. She didn't care about it. Her mind went to how he'd treated poor Sophie, how Jax had risked his life for her picture, how Frankie had tried to stand in the way, and what had she done? Just stood there. She was tired of standing still. She was tired of doing nothing while everyone else suffered. Fine, do what you want, because I'm going to do what I want. Ember lunged. Hannibal drew back the whip and cracked it forward. It ripped at her chest and arm. Ember screamed. It hurt. Damn it all, bloody hurt. It was as though she'd been sliced open and given a full body cramp that wouldn't let up, but she wasn't about to stop moving. Her momentum carried her forward, and she drew back her wrench. Hannibal had just enough time to look surprised as the wrench crashed against his face. Hannibal let out a yelp, but Ember didn't stop. She hit him again, sending him tumbling to the ground. She might have hit him again, but stopped herself so she could grab the Neuro whip he dropped. She picked it up by the handle and glared at him as he groaned on the ground. And then she got a twisted feeling of power, of rage. She raised it and brought it down with a familiar, horrible crack. Hannibal shrieked like a sow as the whip struck him across the back. "You like it?" she screamed. "How does it feel?" She struck again and again and again. Finally, his screaming stopped as the pain had rendered him unconscious. Yet she struck him a few more times, even after the fact, just out of anger. Finally, she threw the whip down and ran to Jax to hoist him up. Jax winced, his eyes flickering. "Ugh, God, I've never seen you that mad before. Kinda hot. You can flirt later. Come on, we're out of here." She started to walk to the door, but he shook his head and slumped forward. "What are you doing, you idiot? Stand up." "I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying," he growled. "The hell you are! God damn it, Amber, this is my home. It's where I was born and where I'm gonna die. You know it. And probably sooner rather than later. Once the Bravos get here, they'll kill me for this. And I'm a dead man. I can't even walk. The bastard did a number to my legs. I'm just gonna slow you down. I'll get Frankie to carry you, you dumbass." "Ember, I don't need you to. Come on. We've got to see the stars. We've got to show Sophie the stars. They're just down the hall. We are so close. Don't give up on me now." "Ember, I don't need to see the stars to know they're there," Jack said with a weak smile. He looked her dead in the face and reached out to her. "I saw them in your face, in your eyes, in each and every one of your stupid stories." Ember froze and stared at him as tears ran down her face. "Jax." "Thank you, Ember." His eyes were getting heavy as he slumped to the floor. You made me think there's more beyond this hellhole. I know I'll never see it. But it has to be a pretty great world out there. If it gave me someone like you. You actually made me want to live." Ember dropped down next to him as he sank to the ground. "Now get out of here already. You go show Sophie those stars. And get her some art classes." "Jax, please." "Come on, Ember. How often does a gutter rat like me get to be a hero?" he asked, shoving her. Ember burst into tears and, for the first time, kissed Jax. They held the kiss a moment before Ember pulled away. Jax's eyes closed and a satisfied smile was on his face. Damn. It was all he could say before he finally sank, his head hitting the ground. Ember didn't wait a moment. Tears rolling down her face, she bolted from the room, the Neuro whip and wrench in her hand as she tore to the evacuation hall where Frankie and Sophie were waiting for her. They had to be waiting for her. Sophie was sitting in Ember's lap, the shuttle rocketing out of the fortress with Frankie in the pilot's seat, maintaining the controls while alarms rang out behind them, announcing the escape of 3 high-value prisoners. Sophie's eyes were glued to the viewing port as she saw the stars for the first time in her life. All of them. A great ocean of lights and colors in the heavens that she couldn't look away from, but Ember couldn't see them through the tears rolling down her face. Jax had given his life for them to see this, and now he would never see them himself. Saw them in your eyes, in each and every one of your stories, Frankie repeated. That's what he said.
Jax,
she cried to herself as her heart ran back to the friend she loved.
Ember? Where are we going?
Sophie asked.
I don't know,
Ember answered. She hadn't told Sophie or Frankie about Jax yet, just that he couldn't come with them. They hadn't argued. Perhaps they knew without being told.
I just know we're never going back underground again. We're going to heaven, and we'll see Jax when we get there.
And that was Ambition for Heaven. One of my longer stories, but one of my favorites. And now you know where that picture turned into. And yes, Jay said that he loved it. Boy, you know what? I loved it too. That was a fun story to write. I really liked that one. All right. We have time for one more if you want. Do you guys want me to read one more story, or do you want to call it there? We can go either way. I just want to know what y'all want. Sorry, checking something while I'm here. There we go. Fixed it. All right. One more? All right, let's see. Which one should I read? First, let me take this down. There we go. All right. Let's see. What should I read? What should I read? I can't read that one. That's a little too long. Maybe this one, Angels in the Storm. I could read that one. Okay. Oh, I think I'll read Angels in the Storm. So this one is a short story I wrote last year. I wrote it as a Christmas gift to my mom and dad. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit of a spoiler. My mom and dad request something from me every year as a story, and they always ask for a certain prompt. In this prompt, my mom wanted me to write about a hero in a disaster. So basically about a hero saving someone in a disaster. Now, at the time, I was going through my Warhammer kind of bent, but my parents don't know anything about Warhammer or care anything about Warhammer. So what I did was I took some concepts from Warhammer and reallocated them into this story, basically adjusting them a little bit. So the story is called Angels in the Storm. It is a sci-fi story, kind of like what we've been doing, but it is different from Jay's World, and it is basically combining elements of Warhammer with elements that I knew my parents would appreciate. So we will do Angels in the Storm and see how this goes, and this will be the last one of the night. All right, so here we go. This was written December 25th, 2024. This is a Christmas gift for my parents. Evangeline winced. Her world of darkness was being burned away by memory of fire and lightning. She grit her teeth and clenched her face up in frustration and fear, fighting back the flashes of pain and searing light. Pain, just so much pain. She remembered quaking and shouting. She remembered screams. She remembered her mother shouting for her to get into the basement, to hide, to take shelter. Where was her mother? Was she lost in the dark too? Forcing herself to fight the dark, Evangeline opened her eyes, and they were met with bleak, dreary, unwelcoming skies. Rain welcoming her face, pelting down with furious, pounding strength. It was a rude awakening, though it was about to get worse. With a wince, she attempted to sit up straight again, but was stopped as she realized she couldn't lift her body. She struggled, grit her teeth tighter, and fought, but the very act of lifting suddenly sent a jolt of agony up her right leg, coursing to her body. She screamed loudly from the pain and spun her head around to see the rubble piled on top of her. And there was something lodged in her leg, something sharp. She began to tear up and whimper at the very thought of what her leg may look like under all that rubble. She wanted to yank free, but couldn't. She tried collecting her thoughts, trying to remember how she'd gotten here. She thought back. There had been sirens. There had been shouting. Her mother had told her to hide in the basement, but how could she see the sky if she was in the basement? It then dawned on her that if she could see the sky from the basement, then the house above her was gone. How? How could this be possible? She knew the answer to that question without having to vocalize it. They called it the Great Storm. Aqua Laguna, Malum Tempestus, the Wrath of Heaven. Whatever name was used, it was anticipated to be one of the most devastating storms that Andrethia had ever experienced. Storms were a usual phenomena for Adrethia. The stormy season here lasted from spring to autumn, and the people had largely grown used to them. There were clear shelters and evacuation protocols that were in place for these disasters, but this time something had happened. Something no one had expected. The sound of rolling thunder pulled her from her thoughts and memories. Though the storm was beginning to move away, the danger was not past. She could feel the ground beneath her shivering, the sound of running water outside. The tides were undoubtedly higher, and she was thankful that her home was elevated, but that wasn't a guarantee of safety. It was a known fact that the tide and high water levels were still an issue for the city, even a few days after the initial storm moved by. So as the rain fell down upon her and the winds howled, Evangeline knew in her heart that no one could save her now. No one would. Yet that truth didn't stop her from calling for help. She shouted with all her might into the storm. She screamed herself almost hoarse as she bellowed and cried and yelped for agony. She tried to lift herself up further to maybe shout more clearly, but she felt the pain in her leg again and squealed. Falling back, her eyes felt heavy, her leg was tingling and it felt numb. Her voice hurt and she was coughing from breathing in too much rainwater. She was cold, wet, and hungry. Was she going to die here? Was this where she accepted the darkness? Maybe it would have been better if she hadn't woken up at all. She wouldn't have been given false hope that she might escape this horrible fate, this cursed storm. She began to sink back down on the wet, destroyed floor, ready to give in to the tempest, and the cold, wet dark began to swallow her vision like a hungry beast. "Are you alive?" The voice shattered and cut through the inky black. She wanted it to go away. She just wanted to surrender. "Speak to me." She winced as the voice stabbed into her harder, forcefully. It wasn't the voice, it was her leg. The stabbing pain was throbbing and sending spasms of pain to yank her out of the dark embrace she'd been ready to accept only moments ago. She whimpered and squirmed against the pain. "It seems you yet live." Evangeline opened her eyes at last, fighting back, and she looked up to see a giant. Evangeline was never a very tall girl. At only 16 years old, she was still rather short and thin for her age. But this Titan before her was taller and larger than even her father. He was adorned in dark armor, wearing a closed helmet with a drenched hood over it, blocking the rain from his visors. He was kneeling on the ground, and Evangeline noticed that his gauntleted hands were holding up the wreckage that had covered Evangeline. She turned her head wearily down to see herself. She was caked in mud and blood and dirt. Her pajamas were torn in places and soaked to the point of being almost see-through. She gasped in pain and saw her right leg and shrieked. There was a sizable metal beam stuck into her thigh. She hissed in pain just looking at it, and the Titan took note. "Stay still, young one," he said in a deep voice, distorted by the helmet he wore. With a forceful heave, he shoved the wreckage he was holding off as it tumbled to the ground with a crash like the thunder. Evangeline looked up at the mighty Titan in disbelief. She knew what he was, but had never thought she'd see one in her entire life. The Titan knelt down and looked over her leg. "I am no doctor or apothecary, but I can treat this. It will hurt. Are you prepared?" Evangeline stammered. Without waiting for her confirmation, the Titan grabbed the beam in his gauntlet and yanked hard upwards, ripping the beam from her leg. The pain was outstanding. Evangeline could not hold back a scream of shock and pain as she felt the metal bar tear itself from her thigh. She beat her fist hard on the ground and kicked her left leg furiously as her right one began to pump blood. But the Titan was not finished. He then pulled from one of his leather satchels strapped to his belt, each one the size of Evangeline's head, and pulled a medical gear. Gauze, stitches, bandages. He began to work carefully to staunch the bleeding, and the pain continued. She howled. She bit her teeth. She cursed and swore in such a way that she was glad her mother wasn't there to hear it. It was absolute torture, and it seemed to go on without end. "It hurts," she screamed. The Titan nodded in his helmeted head. "I'm sure it does," John said. "As I said, I am no apothecary, but this will sustain you until I can get you to the refugee center." Evangeline swore loudly again, but bit her lip hard to stop herself from continuing to do so. She didn't want to look at her leg or what the Titan was doing to it. She just wanted the pain to stop. But it never did. Only lessened somewhat after he finally stopped messing with it. "That should suffice," he said, simply standing back up. "Can you rise?" It was a stupid question. Evangeline knew it. She couldn't even get onto her knees with her leg pain. She finally dared to glance down and see the bandages wrapped carefully around her leg. It wasn't pretty, but it was at least tight enough to prevent any more severe bleed out. She then looked back up at the Titan to take him in somewhat better, and what she saw still amazed her. There was no question what this man was. He was one of the angels. When humanity had learned to colonize the stars, the threat of alien forces and hostile parties was a recognized threat to be considered. To prepare for this eventuality, mankind developed a military force known as the Archangels, genetically augmented men who were taller, stronger, faster, and more powerful than any average human. Armed with the finest weapons and armor, they were deployed into only the most dangerous battlefields and disaster zones. The Archangels were venerated and feared in equal measure. Most people went their whole lives without ever seeing them, and if they ever did see them, odds were good that your world or your colony was in serious danger. What on earth was one doing here? Was the storm that terrible? Evangeline couldn't take her eyes off this Titan, magnificent and glorious to behold, but also terrifying. When she did not answer his question, the angel knelt down and carefully scooped her up, holding her in his arms with a delicate embrace she would not have expected from such a large and powerful man. "If you cannot walk, then I shall carry you there," he said simply. "What is your name?"
"Evangeline."
"I am Lieutenant Raphael Leon of the Archangels." He hoisted up Evangeline as though she was still a toddler and began to carry her out of the wreckage. Evangeline could see the devastated state of her home, along with all the other buildings and structures along the street, and beyond. The street itself was like a great river pushing past them in a powerful torrent. She watched as vehicles were tipped on their sides, doors and windows devastated, and any structures still somewhat standing largely reduced to skeletal frameworks of what that caused to be. It was as if the storm had torn away everything from Evangeline's memory and claimed it as its own, leaving her this stormy, half-submerged nightmare. The powerful angel, Raphael, walked towards the torrent and stepped into it. She started to say something to dissuade him. Surely the powerful flowing water would yank him off his feet, but to her shock, he stood in it as easily as though we were wading through a pool. The water rushed around his large, armored legs, and the powerful giant took a few careful steps through the current. "The force of the water is strong. I will not be able to go at normal speed. We should reach the shelter in a few hours, though. Can you manage?" he asked. Evangeline tried to get her thoughts in order. The pain in her leg was still there, even if dulled. The rain was still pelting her head, and her clothes were freezing cold and wet. She was shivering from the chill and the pain. She wanted to lay back down, but doing so was likely going to be her death, and she didn't want to die. She tried to think, tried to rationalize.
"Mom?"
The word squeaked out of her weakly, and it sparked a sense of fear and realization. Where was her mom? In the moment of clarity, she looked back at the ruined house Raphael pulled her from.
Where's Mom?"
"There are no life signs within that structure aside from you," Raphael answered matter-of-factly. "I only found you because I detected a heat signature within the rubble, and I found you. Your mother will have reached the safety of the shelter, I believe." Evangeline tried to consider that possibility, but would she run away and leave Evangeline behind like that? No, that wasn't like her. If she had to evacuate, it was not by her own will, but more than likely she was swept up in the evacuation efforts. Or perhaps when the house caved in, she assumed that Evangeline was dead and left under that assumption. Either option was preferable to the idea her mother had callously left her behind, or that she was dead. Evangeline, choosing to trust the angel, finally nodded, and the angel continued to march through the water. They traveled in silence a while. Raphael was silent as he marched through the raging river that had once been her neighborhood street. 1,000 questions raced quietly through Evangeline's mind. Where was her mother? Why had they not evacuated earlier? What was an archangel doing here when there was no war to fight? Was her school still standing? Was her father's gravestone still propped up at its little cemetery? Or had that too been devastated by this storm? Despite all these questions, only one escaped her lips. "Why?" she whispered weakly. That one word seemed to let out all the pent-up confusion in her heart at once, and it came out as a shocked sob. Raphael heard it somehow through his helm and turned his head towards her. "Why what?" "Why did this happen?" "I am unsure," Raphael answered. "I'm not native to this colony. I was born and raised on Mother Earth herself before being inducted into the Angels. I am unfamiliar with the weather patterns of this world, though I am told that it is a uniquely strong typhoon world." He spoke like an encyclopedia, offering rudimentary answers with limited emotion. But that was expected. Archangels were created for war and battle against inhuman horrors. They likely weren't the most conversational of individuals. However, that begged her next question. "You're an archangel. What are you doing here?" She winced as the arms of her carrier shifted and her legs swung painfully. Seeing her wince, the giant adjusted his hold again to cradle her more carefully. "We had received a distress signal from this colony a week ago. My company and I were sent here to discover the cause of the distress, but when we arrived, we discovered your colony was under the assault of the storm. We shifted our focus to search and rescue. Unfortunately, we have found few survivors. You are the only one I've found since I started searching this sector earlier today. I do not know if my brothers have found any others. The storm is making radio contact difficult and patchy." That answered her question. But what had sent the distress beacon? There had never been an invasion on their world. What alien threats would be interested in a world like this, where storms were almost a present threat for half the year? In fact, the more she thought about it, why had humanity wanted to colonize this world? She didn't know, and right now that wasn't her first concern. Her first was to get to the shelter, hope her mom was there, and put her trust in this giant. As they walked on, although Evangeline remained cradled in Raphael's arm, they would occasionally pass by another destroyed building or the odd object drifted up by the river, and Evangeline was horrified to occasionally see dead bodies among them. She would wince at the sight. "I would advise averting your eyes." "How can you look at that?" she asked. "I've seen enough death to have grown somewhat used to the sight," Raphael answered. "I will not say it is easy to witness, but see it enough and in time." His voice trailed off, and for the first time Evangeline sensed that the great warrior was finally letting some of his stoicism slip. Maybe he was a human under that armor after all. He was putting on a braver face than perhaps was real, but it was this very thought that led to Evangeline's next question. "Could you take off your helmet?" "Why?" "I don't know. I don't know what angels look like." "Now isn't the time," he answered gruffly. There was suddenly a tenseness in his voice, a warning sound. He wasn't angry at her for the question. Rather, it seemed he'd noticed something that she had not. Like a dog suddenly growling at something its owner hadn't registered. His free hand, now cradling her, slipped to a giant pistol holstered at his hip. He unlatched the gun and held it level. The sight of his scent was a wave of fear up Evangeline's spine. "What's wrong?" "Uncertain. I heard something." Evangeline was surprised by the answer. Over the howl of the wind, it was hard enough for Raphael's own words to be heard, let alone anything else. But if the archangel said there was something out there, they were certain to be able to tell. And in a flash of movement, the angel raised his pistol up and aimed down a distant street. "Come out," he ordered. There was a pause, and then a voice. "Brother Raphael," the voice called. Raphael's arm lowered. "Thank God," Raphael read. "Brother Gabriel." From behind a ruined restaurant walked towards another giant. He wore the same armor as Raphael did, though in his hands was a huge gun that was held in both gauntlets. He too wore a hood over his helm to keep the rain off, and he approached carefully through the water. "Raphael, it's good to see you," Gabriel called as he approached. His voice was somewhat deeper than Raphael's, though it carried no less power. "Have you been able to contact the rest of the company? This cursed storm is making that near impossible, Gabriel." "Damn it," Gabriel hissed. His gaze must have shifted to Evangeline because he paused again before asking his next question. "And who is this?" "The only survivor I've been able to find. She goes by Evangeline, and she appears injured. I did what I could, but she will receive better care at the shelter. I'm heading there now." Evangeline suddenly felt a wave of frustration at the two giants speaking about her like she wasn't there. "Excuse me, I'm right here." The two looked at her clearly surprised when Gabriel let out a warm laugh. "My apologies, milady. I don't mean to be rude. My name is Gabriel, an archangel like Raphael here. Gabriel and I have served together for years. We both were chosen to be archangels at the same time," Raphael explained, before turning his attention back to the matter at hand. "Anything else to report, brother?" "The city is all but destroyed," Gabriel answered. "I have met with occasional dissidents." Dissidents? Evangeline had heard that word before, but it didn't make sense. What do they mean, dissident? Whatever he meant, Raphael nodded his head. "We should get together, Gabriel. I shall deliver this one to the evacuation shelter and then...
Evacuation? Evangeline finally asked. What's going on? Why are the angels here? I don't understand any of this.
Her questions were now pouring out of her little mouth, and Raphael stopped to gaze at her as she spoke.
Just tell me what's going on already.
Should she be told? Gabriel asked. She will know when we arrive at the shelter in any case, so best she knows now, Raphael shrugged. We shall explain as we go. The two began to march towards the street, and as they went, Raphael began to tell her the horrible truth. The meteorological patterns of this world have always been unstable, and the ICD, the Interstellar Colonization Department, has been questioning the viability of this world as a place to colonize for several decades. The planetary governor has assured the ICD that this planet was hospitable, that there was no trouble here. However, recent reports have been received about a massive typhoon that would prove hazardous to any human populace on the planet. The ICD declared the planet inhospitable, and they ordered the immediate evacuation of this world.
They did?
Evangeline asked, stunned. That was last year, Gabriel explained, but the order to evacuate was ignored by your planetary governor, Nigel Kane. When diplomats and emissaries were sent to relay the message in person, they went missing, and we believe that there were those in power who were not willing to heed the warnings of the ICD.
But why? No one told us about the storm or that there was an ordered evacuation.
We're uncertain, Raphael growled. Perhaps your governor didn't like the idea of answering to any authority other than his own. Or perhaps he feared that if the planet were evacuated and deemed inhospitable, he would lose his current status as a governor, so he willfully disregarded the order. Regardless, after the emissaries failed to communicate back to the ICD, the authorities have sent the Archangels to ensure that the evacuation proceeds smoothly and to contend with any who try to resist.
But you're too late. The storm's already here.
We're not too late, actually. This is merely the first wave of the storm, the beginnings of birth pains, if you'll permit the phrase.
The what?
Evangeline felt her stomach lurch in distress. The true typhoon is still a few days off. This is merely the first band of the actual storm, Gabriel explained. The real storm is en route. We have perhaps 24 hours before that monster arrives. Which is why we're here, to ensure no one is left that can be saved, Raphael added. Evangeline didn't like being told these things. It was as if her whole world were being rocked, and in every literal sense it was. Never once had she considered that this world was to be evacuated, that the threats of the storms would become this devastating, or that the governor and his cabinet, the people meant to protect them and care for them, would ever put their own interests before the people's. But, then again, perhaps that's the way people think when they're given the opportunity. It was something she remembered her mother saying when she was still very small. When you have power, letting it go becomes so much harder than obtaining it. Evangeline remained silent and somewhat stupefied at her, and perhaps the whole planet's saviors carrying her across the storm-battered sea. They walked for some 3 hours. Evangeline had fallen asleep at one point, but awoke every now and then to Raphael or Gabrielle attempting to contact their company with no luck. The clouds overhead never seemed to thin or move away, and though the rain occasionally let up for brief moments, it would then return with the same intensity as before. Evangeline shivered violently a few times, wishing she were safe inside the armor of those giants with her.
How much further? She dared to ask.
Another 2 hours from the nearest evacuation shelter. We should arrive by night. Repeat last! Gabriel suddenly snapped. Raphael turned his attention to Gabriel with surprise. Brother, did you get a message? Switch to frequency 7, Gabriel instructed. Raphael held still and raised his free gauntlet to his helmet, adjusting something. He stood stock still as the two warriors listened to a voice that Evangeline could not hear. She couldn't see their faces through the hoods and helmets, but she could tell that whatever news they were hearing was not welcome, for Raphael and Gabriel had both gone rigid and were motionless. After a minute or two, Raphael turned to Gabriel with a curt nod. So it is true. Treason. The audacity.
What is it? Evangeline asked.
The message was from our commander, Raphael explained. Governor Kane has declared full independence from Mother Earth and has declared this world an independent state and our presence here an affront and invasion. He's trying to cancel the evacuation order, and he's already ordered local military to fire on any archangels or citizens who resist.
But he can't do that.
He already has, Gabriel corrected.
But if that's true, how do we get to the shelter? Will Mom be there?
Fear not. 3 more of our company are en route to assist in retaking the shelter. You will be safe, Raphael assured her. As for the case of your mother, I do not know, but take heart, little one. We will not abandon you.
You promise? Evangeline asked fearfully.
Raphael and Gabriel both chuckled warmly to her, and Gabriel placed his fist over his chest where his heart was in a show of devotion. "By our oaths and our honor, we swear to get you to safety," Gabriel announced.
Evangeline shockingly found herself smiling at the oath sworn. It was pretty words, and yet she felt that they were genuine. The two giants then took off with renewed purpose, marching on through the river. Evangeline tried to lift herself up a bit, until the pain in her leg exploded again and she sank back into Raphael's arm. Her thoughts were stirring, and yet they kept going back to her mother. When she was small, only a few years old, she remembered her mother telling her how this world, though stormy and harsh, was a fine world, a place to be proud, that they would make a meaningful life here. Had her mother ever considered the thought that maybe this world was not fit to live on? Did she ever question the decision to live in a tempest-cursed hell? She'd always hated this world, hated the mandatory evacuations to shelters and bunkers all around just to hide from the weather. Though her mother had always tried to tell her how proud she should be, that she was never proud of this world. It's the world that took her father from her when he'd gotten sick. It's the world that's so far from Earth it would take 2 months on the fastest starship just to get there. It's a world she had no love for, yet it was still her world. And now she was learning of a cruel and awful truth about it. The coming of a terrible, unstoppable maelstrom, the ignorance of the people, the power-hungry selfishness of its governor, and now only a small group of titans in armor might help her escape it. And even that felt difficult to believe as they battled the endless rain and tides.
"Brother, I'm getting a signal, private radio signal." "Who is it?" "It's Nathan."
"Who?" Evangeline asked.
"One of our fellow angels. What does he say?" "He and Squad E have retaken the evacuation shelter from local military, but they're rallying and preparing for a second attack to retake the shelter. Any casualties?"
"Is my mom at the shelter?"
Evangeline spoke up quickly. Gabriel fell silent as he waited to listen for further messages. "2 injured battle brothers, 1 casualty. Silas," Gabriel hissed. Raphael shook his head. "Damn it," he snarled. "Can we reach them before the second attack?" "We will have to try," Gabriel answered. But then his eyes fell on Evangeline. "Brother, she will undoubtedly slow us down." Raphael glanced down at Evangeline, knowing she still wouldn't walk. "Inform Nathan, tell him our location and about the girl, and ask if her mother is there. What is your mother's name, Evangeline?"
"Her name's Josephine Pirtle," Evangeline answered.
Raphael gave the information and Gabriel sent the message. They waited what felt like endless moments until the pelting rain, Gabriel's hell betrayed no expression, and the waiting was driving Evangeline mad with nerves. "We have orders from Commander Nathan. Our first priority is holding the evacuation shelter from being retaken. We are to cut through the flooded warrens and reach the western side of the shelter. There the girl will be delivered to her mother."
"She's there?" Evangeline cried.
"Yes," Gabriel nodded. "A woman named Josephine Pirtle was located at the shelter. According to the commander, she is relieved to hear you're alive." Raphael nodded to Evangeline. "Take heart. There is light through this storm yet, young one. Commander Nathan warns that the warrens might be watched by the military. We will have to proceed cautiously. If there is a fight to be had, we cannot allow her to be in the crossfire," Gabriel pointed out. "Agreed. Should we request a different route? That would take longer, but it would ensure her protection. Even then, there's no guarantee we reach the shelter before the enemy, and the storm is going to get worse before it gets better." The prospect of walking into combat sent a ripple of fear through Evangeline, but the knowledge her mother was alive and waiting for her filled her with a conviction she hadn't realized she forgot.
"I'm not afraid,"
she cried. The 2 angels looked at her a moment, then at each other. "You know it will be difficult for us to protect you if the fighting starts," Raphael explained. "And even were you able to stand on your own, the water there is too high for you. You'd be swept away."
"Maybe, but Mom's waiting for me, and the other angels need you too. I want to go."
"Ha! She's got more heart than some of your own brothers," Gabriel laughed. "Well, it's your call, Raphael." The warrens were indeed flooded. Water flowed between buildings and through doors. It was like looking at a lake in which ruined structures attempted to push their way out of the waters, and yet the warren seemed different than the rest of the city they passed. There was an ominous sensation about it. Evangeline didn't need to voice her concern, though, as Raphael was already well aware. "I'm picking up life signs," he said. "It's an ambush." "Indeed," Gabriel nodded. "Secure our young ward." Raphael suddenly lifted Evangeline from his arms and walked her to a 3-story building, with one of its walls all but gone. She set her on the exposed second floor, which was a few feet above the water, and she winced as her leg felt the pressure of being laid down. "You must remain here and out of sight," he instructed. "I cannot fight the enemy while holding you. You would be in serious danger."
But what about you?
We are archangels, Raphael answered. We will fight Earth's enemies, whoever or whatever they are. This is our duty. Yours is to survive and return to your family. Now wait for us here. We will return to you. He then turned on his heel, returning to Gabriel. The two Titans marched towards the known kill zone set up for the ambushers. Gabriel looked around at the buildings. He could not see the soldiers in hiding, but he knew they were there all the same. Let it be known, he shouted. We are archangels under the jurisdiction of Earth's Stellar Defense Force. Attacking us will be seen as an act of treason, and we shall be given full authority to end your lives. Surrender yourselves. Amnesty may yet be offered. Get off our world, you monster! Came a loud shout. Raphael turned just in time to see a man hiding on the third-floor balcony of an apartment building chuck a grenade down at him. Raphael leapt back and let the explosion go off a few yards away. The shrapnel pinged off his arm, and he drew his gun fast, aiming high and firing once. The bark of the gun resounded, and there was a loud crack and popping noise as the attacking soldier's body was knocked back and off the balcony. The enemy has chosen to greet us with battle, Raphael snarled. Let us educate them on the subject. The two angels drew their weapons, and the battle was on. Evangeline whimpered as she half crawled, half staggered up the wet staircase leading to the upper floor of the devastated building. She guessed it was some sort of office complex, given all the battered and turned over desks and terminals all around. She didn't like the idea of just sitting in one place where the rescuers were holding the line all by themselves. Though she knew there was little she could do to help them, she wanted to at least see where they were, what she couldn't do from her lower position. She crawled her way to the third floor, her leg dragging behind her painfully. She grunted and cursed at it, but willing herself to higher ground as she made her way to the higher level. Reaching it, she was pleased to see that the wall that had been damaged on the second floor was just as damaged on the third, giving her a view of the Warrens from here. She dared to scramble shoddily to the edge to see Raphael and Gabriel, and what she saw made her eyes widen in terror. There are stories about the archangels and their way of war. As Titans augmented and designed for battle, they walked through swaths of enemies to the roar of gunfire and the song of blades. As she looked out on the battlefield, she understood those stories had a degree of truth. The term archangel seemed inappropriate. Perhaps it would be wiser to call them death angels. Where they stormed, death followed. 3 men attempted to fire on Gabriel from a window position, and Gabriel dispatched them with a discharge from his rifle. The bullets of which were so large and powerful they tore through the battered brick and mortar like it was nothing but plaster. After they fell to the fire, Gabriel spun fast and fired again at another man, who Evangeline hadn't even seen emerging from his own place of hiding. Raphael was no less deadly, and the sight of him sent a shiver through her body. The very hand that cradled her like a baby was now gripping a combat blade, almost as long as she was tall, yet he wielded it one-handed as though it was a machete. Some of the soldiers had tried attacking in special mech suits to hopefully put them on equal footing with the angels. Their mistake, as Raphael demonstrated by gutting them systematically. Small arms fire that hit their armor musically rebounded off, leaving small dents and scars but little else. It seemed as though these warriors were all but unstoppable, leaving behind a trail of death and blood in their wake. She was relieved, but also trembling. Suddenly there was a loud hissing sound, and Evangeline saw something streak from a building across the street from her, a trail of smoke following a small metal projectile. It was a missile launcher. The missile struck Gabriel in the back of his armor, and this time he didn't shrug it off. With a howl, Gabriel was thrown to the ground. His armor burnt and torn. He splashed in the water when he hit and leaned on his arm. The massive armor of the Titan had absorbed the brunt of the blast, but he wasn't getting back up from the attack. Raphael, seeing his battle brother go down, turned fast and fired at the man on the roof to prevent him from firing again. Evangeline felt her heart leap into her throat as she saw the water around Gabriel turn red. Was he going to die? A movement out of the corner of her eye suddenly caught Evangeline's eyes, drawing her attention away from the wounded Gabriel and the still fighting Raphael. She turned to see a figure emerging from hiding from a sniper's nest only yards away from her. There was a man there wearing the military fatigues of the Planetary Military Corps. He was holding a huge rocket launcher on his shoulder, and he was taking aim with it. He was going to hit Raphael. He was going to kill him. Why hadn't he noticed Evangeline? Perhaps he thought she was another corpse, or perhaps he was so focused on the battle he didn't see her. She looked on at the battle below. The storm clouds overhead rumbled and building in anger, and the man nearly ready to end the life of the angel who had pulled her from the rubble and swore an oath to protect her. "No!" she shrieked. With all her strength, she lifted herself and lunged at the man, knocking him aside. They both fell, and Evangeline screamed in pain as she had had to leap with her bad leg. The two hit the floor, and the soldier snapped in fury. "Gah! Little brat!" kicking at her face with his boot. Evangeline squealed and immediately grabbed his leg in a vicious but desperate attempt to hold him back. The soldier kicked and shouted and snarled, "Let me go! Let me go, you little bitch! Let me go right now or I'll kill you!" "Raphael!" she screamed through bloody teeth, her cheeks swelling and bruising up already as she helplessly cried and clung to the man's leg with all the strength she had in her body. She had to stop him. She had to. But even as she declared this to herself, she felt another kick reach the side of her face, and her strength gave way as she saw stars and colors flash in her eyes from the pain. The soldier broke his leg free and then pulled a handgun from his hip. Evangeline looked up through dazed eyes, her mouth bloody and her hands shaking. She was staring up at the blurry figure of a blood-crazed man with a gun pointed right at her face. She was going to die here on this godforsaken wet rock amidst the howl of a coming apocalyptic storm, by a jackbooted thug whose loyalty was to a governor who cared more about his own position than her life or anyone's. There was a twisted irony, she thought, as she felt time seem to slow before death. The irony of it all. She thought she would be saved from this rock by an angel, but instead she'd be saved from it to join the real angels. As she felt tears in her eyes from the pain and the fear, she quietly hoped that when she got to heaven, she'd at least get to see her father there. The shot never came. Suddenly, a great shadow seemed to appear behind the gunman, and a titan in green armor lunged himself up to the third floor with a tremendous leap. His combat blade in hand, Raphael stormed towards the gunman with a furious charge. The militia soldier, who barely came up to the giant's waist, was knocked flying backwards, or he crashed into the undisturbed wall with a crush. But Raphael didn't stop. He threw himself forward and grabbed the gunman in a mighty gauntlet and hurled him out to the other side of the room, out of the destroyed wall, and into the street as if he was throwing a rag doll. With a scream, the soldier plummeted to the floored street below, 3 stories down. Raphael glared out after him briefly before turning back to Evangeline. "Are you all right?" he asked. "No," Evangeline squeaked. "Your honesty is refreshing," Raphael chuckled as he knelt down. He reached up with his gauntlets and for the first time removed his helmet. Under the helm was the face of a man possibly in his 30s, maybe early 40s. He had short-cut hair the color of tree bark. His eyes were a deep black like a pair of beetles, and his left cheek had a deep scar running from the bridge of his nose down to his left jaw. He was ruggedly handsome, all things considered. But he was still so huge that Evangeline had some trouble taking him in. "I'm sorry," she whimpered as his head leaned close to Inspector. "Worry not. In truth, it is I who would beg your forgiveness, and offer you thanks. I had not realized the enemy was entrenched here where I hid you. But had it not been for your intervention, that man might have killed me." He placed a hand on her cheek, though his hand was so big it practically cupped her whole face. "You showed great bravery, little Evangeline." "Is the fighting over?" "In the Warrens, yes," Raphael answered, "but the battle is not. I shall have to rejoin the rest of my company and defend the evacuation shelter until the ships can arrive to ferry you out of here." He moved close and lifted Evangeline up in his arm again, just like before. With his free hand, he put away his combat blade and gun. Evangeline clung to him as he jumped down, landing with a crashing splash and HUD into the street below. There were bodies, blood, and pieces of soldiers strewn everywhere, floating in the water and splattered on the walls. Evangeline didn't look at them. She was looking at Gabriel, who was still leaning against a near-collapsed wall. "Gabriel?" she weakly asked. The injured angel glanced up, his helmet having been destroyed, showing a man's smiling face under it. He had dark skin and a bald head with chocolate brown eyes. His smile was pained, but it was there. "How shameful to show such weakness before a lovely lady." "Brother," Raphael whispered. "I am unable to stand, Raphael." Gabriel winced, clutching his injured side, though his smile remained. "Do not waste time trying to carry myself and her." "I will not leave you, brother." "You will," Gabriel snapped, his eyes deadly serious. "You will because our duty is not done. Your oath to that child is your only priority, brother."
"I don't want you to die either."
Your concern is kind, dear. If you wish to help me, get off this cursed rock and find your mother. That will please me greatly." Raphael dropped to one knee and placed a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "We will go, but I'll tell our medics to come to you. If there is any hope, if the Lord has called me home, Raphael, then that is his decision, and I accept it, as we all did the day we joined the angels." Gabriel hissed coldly, his smile fading slightly to a more serious expression. Raphael nodded and then placed his hand on Gabriel's chest in a sign of brotherly attention. Gabriel placed his own on top of Raphael's, and the two looked at each other with a warmth that came close to familial. Then until we meet again on Zion, brother, I will see you there, Raphael. My brother. They then let go of each other, and Raphael turned on his heel, carrying Evangeline away towards the shelter. Evangeline watched Raphael's face, and though it was hard and resolute, she saw anger and pain in his eyes.
What did you mean? What's Zion?
It's a saying amongst the archangels, Raphael explained. We are not true angels, just humans blessed and strengthened by science and training. However, our purpose is like that of angels, to perform the will of God and to safeguard his children. So we say that when we die, we will go directly to Zion, where we prepare to join God's real angels in battle with the dark powers in the great Armageddon. It is a pleasing thought to us that after the meaningless wars in this life, our true battle yet awaits us. A final battle after which we can truly rest.
Are you really Gabriel's brother?
We fought side by side many years, yes. I consider him a brother in battle, not a blood brother.
I'm sorry, Raphael.
Do not be. I haven't seen Gabriel smile like that for a very long time. Seeing you in your conviction, seeing you alive, I'm certain he is proud and satisfied. But now you must do him honor in return and escape this place. The evacuation shelter, as it turned out, was a commandeered spaceport. The port was designed for ships far beyond the planet to land and make deliveries or transport passengers. Now it was where the refugees were gathering. It was massive, with a huge dome-like ceiling that was shut closed. Beyond it was the sight of an enormous white ship, larger than any that Evangeline had ever seen. What's that? Your transport off this world. It is currently fueling for flight and will be ready to depart in less than 24 hours. Our job is to ensure the shelter is not taken before that, Raphael explained as he marched up the road towards the shelter. No sooner had he explained this than suddenly figures began moving towards them. They were all tall, towering, and armored like Raphael. There were 5 of them, all with guns in hand. Brother, one crowd. Raphael, thank God, we were beginning to worry. I'm fine, Zachariah, replied. Where is Gabriel? Is he not with you? Gabriel has gone to Zion, brothers. The 5 Titans all went stiff, placing their hands over their chest in a salute. May the Lord welcome and honor him, they all said together. There was a moment of silence, and then Raphael spoke to Evangeline. Evangeline, these are the others of my company. Zachariah, Isaiah, Michael, Malachi, and Adriel. All 5 of the men before her nodded. And of course, Michael chortled, we already know about you, brave Evangeline.
You do?
Gabriel sent a message ahead about you, Zachariah confirmed. Said you'd been found buried, and like Lazarus, had been pulled from death back to life again. The group chuckled, and Raphael shook his head. More than that. She saved my life, Raphael confirmed. Where is Commander Nathaniel? I wish to give him my report. I am here, Raphael. All the Titans suddenly turned and stood at attention as another approached. He wore the same armor, but he also wore a white and gold sash around his shoulders, as well as a symbol on his chest like that of a sword. Commander, Raphael cried. Peace, brother, Nathaniel said calmly. I know you have much to say, but there is still work to be done. The local military is determined to dislodge us. They are mounting an offensive, which will be arriving within hours. We must lock down the shelters to ensure it is not breached before the ship is ready to depart. His eyes then drifted to Evangeline. And I believe you also have an oath to fulfill, young lady.
Evangeline!
The sound of her voice sent a great cry of happiness from Evangeline's throat. The woman who was her mother tore through the giant sea of refugees and escapees. Evangeline was sitting in a medic cot with doctors moving in and out, treating those who were injured and seeing to any they could. Evangeline couldn't get up from the bed, but that did not stop her from embracing her mother, the two holding on to each other and weeping as they nearly collapsed.
Oh, when the ceiling collapsed, when I didn't hear you, I was so sure.
Evangeline repeated her mother's name again and again. She didn't know how long they held on to each other, but she didn't want to let go now that she'd finally been reunited. Your daughter is very brave, ma'am, Raphael, who had been standing nearby, said with a relaxed smile. She saved my life just as much as I did hers. You should be proud. Her mother looked up at the archangel and beamed. Thank you, sir. Thank you for bringing my baby back to me. Raphael placed his fist to his chest and bowed. It was my honor. Suddenly the air trembled as thunder roared above. The crowd of refugees all muttered and whimpered fearfully. The great storm was drawing ever closer. Raphael sighed and turned. And now I must perform my other honor for you.
Wait, Evangeline cried. Wait, please. Don't leave.
Raphael looked back at her and smiled. I must perform my duty, Evangeline.
But you could die.
Yes, I could, Raphael answered. but that is no excuse not to do what is right. He approached her and knelt down so they were closer to eye level. She gazed into his ink-black eyes, and he reached out a gauntleted hand to her, which she took, barely able to hold two of his fingers in her hands. Dear, brave Evangeline, you saved my life today, as I saved yours. You are as much a hero to me as you perhaps see me as. But I am an archangel, and my duty is to ensure your safety. If I am to die for anything, let it be for the sake of those I seek to protect.
Raphael.
Before she could say more, Raphael suddenly pulled his helmet from his belt and held it to her. Take this. Shocked, Evangeline took the large helmet from him and felt its weight in her hands. Take it, and remember that you are the savior of an angel.
But don't you need it?
Evangeline cried. The visor was damaged in the battle at the Warrens, and it's difficult to see out of. I will do better without it for this, he chuckled. He then stood up once more. You have the heart of an angel, Evangeline. Wherever you go from here, never forget that. Perhaps I will see you at Zion one day. He then turned to walk away towards his fate.
Raphael, Evangeline cried, thank you for everything. She called, hugging the helmet tightly as Raphael gave a wave back at her and rejoined his brothers.
Evangeline followed the long line of refugees boarding the ship to escape the planet. The rain was pelting hard now. Dark clouds the color of coal were drifting slowly towards the city. The wind was howling and moaning. Evangeline kept her eyes tightly gripped around the helmet of Raphael, and her mother kept her arm around Evangeline as they made their way to the boarding ramp. As she started to step on, she dared one last look back at the shelter, at the battlefield. It was hard to see, but she could see shapes moving, giants among boats and men, guns blazing and blades singing. Daringly, she put Raphael's helmet on over her head. It was far too large, but she could just see out of the red visors. She paused. She could see out of the visors? Her mind went back to what Raphael had said. The visor was damaged in the battle. I cannot use it. Evangeline felt tears rolling down her face, fogging her view as she looked through the perfectly functional visors that Raphael had said were damaged, and through tear-filled eyes she saw a legion of angels standing against the sea-born terrors, standing stalwart against a deadly storm that was so sure to overtake them, but not once faltering, not once flinching, not once fleeing or crying out. They would fight, they would fulfill their oaths, and they would win.
I'm so sorry, Evangeline, her mother whispered, but I don't think they'll survive. They will, Evangeline willed herself to reply, because they're angels.
Epilogue. Mankind has colonized over 20 different planets and stars. The dream of man to wander the stars was truly coming true. However, Evangeline was happy to live on Earth herself. 12 years had passed since that fateful evacuation of Adrithea, and the young girl had grown into a young woman. She had a new job now, working as a teacher of children no older than she was at the time. She is a firm woman, and her students know that she doesn't abide foolishness or disrespect. She carries herself, some say, like a soldier. But what's truly fascinating about Evangeline is the item she keeps in her room. Resting on her desk, just beside her computer terminal, rests a giant helmet, like the ones owned by the great archangels. Its red visors glaring out at the class as if daring them to test or challenge Evangeline or her authority. When asked about it, Evangeline tells a story about her childhood and about an angel who saved her life. The official report on the fate of Adrithea was that the planetary governor attempted a complete insurrection from the Earth's central government. When warned about the incoming Aqua Laguna storm, as it was called, he refused to respond or inform his citizens of the danger. He was charged with treason and, what's worse, was captured off-world in an escape craft that he'd commandeered for his own use. He was sentenced to summary execution for his crimes, by drowning, ironically. The Archangel's 7th Company that had been sent to liberate the planet had not reported back. All hands were considered honorably killed in action, even if they had defeated the military units on planet. There was nothing they could do to survive the devastating storm. Orbital scans found not even a trace of the once enormous cities. All that remained was a massive ocean of water, churning over the planet's surface. In all respects, it seemed that the Archangels of 7th Company had all been destroyed. But Evangeline knew in her heart that wasn't entirely true.
This was just the end of one meaningless battle for them, but their greatest battle was yet to be fought. When she is alone, and no one else is around, Evangeline will take the helmet and put it over her head to look through the perfectly functional visors and speak to the man who wore it once, breathing gently into the stillness. "See you at Zion, brother," she whispers to Raphael. And that was Angels in the Storm, a Christmas gift from my parents. Now, a lot of you were asking how tall the angels were. I designed them to be Custodes' height. I didn't want them to be exactly like Space Marines, so I made them more like Custodes in height. All right. But that's probably what we're going to call it because it is 10:30 and I've been going for quite a while and my voice is worn out. So we're going to call it there. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next week we will try to do something else. We'll either read something or we'll write. I do not know. We will see. But thank you all for watching and I will see you in my next video. Take care, guys.